Chapter 93. The first time, Grimm was defeated by a terrifying Magus-rank flower sprite without any fallen acolytes chasing after him, forcing him to flee the forest in a sorry state. The terrifying flower sprite was obviously a regional monster with a strong sense of territory. Once they left the demonized forest, it would not chase after them. That was how Grimm managed to protect the 3 rock python demon manticores, preventing them from suffering irreparable losses. Glancing back at the lush forest, Grimm's eyes twitched. He ordered the AI chip in a low voice. AI chip, immediately create a mission file on the demonic flower sprite and find a way to defeat or kill it. Beep. Mission accepted. Mission file name, flower sprite. Feasibility plan in progress. Estimated attack strategies that can deal substantial damage to the flower sprite include 1. Curse spells. 2. Attack in a team. 3. Activate the lightning giant plan. 4. Destroy the flower sprite's main body. Grimm knitted his brows and ordered in a soft voice, "Explain to me, how practical are these strategies?" Beep. First, curse spells. The target, the flower demon, was still a living being. Witchcraft curses could reduce part of its combat ability, which would give the devil python more time to break through its defenses. Second, attack in a team. With the current strength of the team, it was impossible for them to take down this wizard-ranked flower spirit. If they wanted to defeat it, they would need to have enough team members to work together and fight against it. Estimated battle strategies are as follows. Third, activate the lightning giant plan. In order to prevent the flower sprite from escaping the rock python manticore's attacks, the team must stay close to it. The team members who can achieve this include Blood Queen Mary and the lightning giant. If the Blood Queen Mary is chosen, the chances of her dying is over 89%, so the lightning giant is recommended. Fourth, destroy the flower sprite's main body. This time, the flower sprite is only a host, and its main body has yet to appear. According to the analysis of the characteristics of this type of monster, as long as we can find the flower sprite's main body, it will lose the energy from the main body, and its battle strength will be greatly reduced. Grimm closed his eyes and listened attentively. After thinking for a while, he asked all sorts of questions. How far have you progressed with the Lightning Giant project? How much longer will it take to complete? Beep, the design of the Lightning Giant has been completed, but we still lack the necessary magic materials. What else is lacking? 5 high-grade wind elemental crystal cores. How powerful will the completed Lightning Giant be? According to the level of sorcerer apprentices I've met in the past, the completed Lightning Giant will have the basic strength of a mid-level quasi-wizard. Compared to that of Fu? According to the basic data, the Lightning Giant's completed body fought against Fu 100 times. It lost 73 times, was heavily injured 11 times, and drew 16 times. Based on my initial estimations, the Lightning Giant's complete form can only move around and maintain a suitable attack distance from Fu. Only by using continuous lightning attacks can it possibly deal appropriate damage to the enemy. That means he can't beat a top-level quasi-magus. Grimm pondered for a moment, silently recalling Fu's brief attack. Although the battle was very short, with the AI chips recording, Grimm could clearly feel Fu's terrifying battle prowess. An extremely powerful physique, and a violent and ferocious physical strength. These two traits bestowed Fu with an unparalleled mystical power. With just one strike, he had easily broken through the demonic rock python's basic defense and transmitted a violent and unparalleled power into the demonic rock python's body. If not for that, he would not have been able to destroy the rock python's body with a single punch and directly capture the summoning crystal core. To be honest, although the sorcerer flower spirit was marked as a sorcerer after scanning, Grimm wasn't sure if the flower spirit would be able to maintain its overwhelming power if it were to fight against Afola. If there was a meat shield like Fu at the front and 4 or 5 quasi-sorcerer apprentices at the back, the chances of winning this battle could still be maintained at 20% to 30%. Of course, if Grimm also sent his 3 rock pythons, the chances of winning would directly increase to 50% to 60%. Therefore, the key to the battle was to effectively deal enough damage to the flower spirit. Otherwise, with just the 3 rock pythons, they would be easily torn into pieces. To increase the battle strength of the team, it was not impossible to ask Fu and the others for help, but that would mean giving away most of the loot. According to Cabby's simple description, there were a few magic treasures that Grimm was determined to obtain. Therefore, after thinking about it, he felt that he could only rely on his own strength. Since he could not ask Fu for help, he could only find something to temporarily replace him. The Lightning Giant plan was a plan that Grimm had tailor-made to strengthen the summoning crystal core after obtaining the core of the Storm Giant. Due to the limited amount of spell formations that could be stored in a single elemental crystal core, it was impossible to add powerful spell formations to it without limit. Therefore, the magic puppets made from quasi-sorcerer crystal cores were a little weak. They could be used to bully lower-ranked opponents, but once they met an opponent of the same rank, they would not be able to display their full strength. Because of this, under Grimm's suggestion, the AI chip strengthened the process of creating magic puppets in a different way. It tried to transfer the spell formations that had previously been etched on a crystal core to another crystal core. When the time came, only one core crystal core would be needed to bear the weight of the main body of the magic puppet, while the other crystal cores would share energy and spell formations to form the key nodes of the new magic puppet. This way, it would be possible to maximize the use of the spell formation space of each crystal core and carve enough strengthening spell formations on them to create an even more powerful elemental magic puppet. Of course, this way, each crystal core would not be able to summon a magic puppet on its own. The core of a quasi-sorcerer storm giant and 6 high-grade wind elemental crystal cores would each have their own functions. The combination of crystal cores and 3-dimensional spell formations would be used to construct the Lightning Giant. However, although this plan had been proposed for half a month, the AI chip had been busy calculating the distribution and connection of the spell formations between the crystal core and the branch nodes, and had not submitted a clear design. Since the AI chip had added this line today, it meant that its calculations had come to an end. The design for the Lightning Giant had been released. After all, this was not a place to stay for long. So, Grimm rested for a while and hurriedly set off on his way back. When he was about to leave, some blind gnolls intercepted him. Grimm, who had been holding back his anger, commanded 3 rock pythons to smash the gnolls' nest into pieces. Facing 3 super monsters that were almost invulnerable to weapons, the gnolls' crossbows, daggers, and short spears were completely useless. If not for Grimm's unwillingness to fight, the famous Grey Ear tribe would have lost 30% of its members in just one wave of attack. Therefore, when the 2 quasi-sorcerers from Blissful City, Langdon and Felix, arrived in a hurry, what they saw was the Grey Ear tribe and the Lizardmen tribe that had been wiped out. Grimm had already left. Listening to the gnoll leader's blood-sobbing story, Langdon, who had a gloomy expression, could not care less about what was going on. Instead, he focused his attention on the magical jungle. There were many strange rumors about that place in Blissful City. His mentor, Blacklight, had also warned him not to have any ideas about the treasures in the abandoned ruins. It seemed that there was something hidden in there. That was why he only knew a little about the magical jungle. He had not explored it in depth. Have you entered the magical jungle before? What's inside? Langdon impatiently interrupted the gnoll leaders crying and asked coldly. He was not a fool. Although many adult warriors of that exterminated lizardmen tribe died from elemental attacks, which reminded him of that bastard's clay puppets, the rest of them died from close-range sharp weapons. Besides, he did not believe that the boy from the surface would have the patience to go deep into the lizardman's nest and slaughter the women and children one by one. This was the closest place to the magical jungle. It was very beneficial for the underground races to control the magical materials there. Therefore, it was obvious what role the gnolls played in the extinction of the lizardmen. But at this time, Langdon was not interested in upholding justice. He was only interested in what that bastard had done in the magical jungle. Did that guy accidentally stumble into this place? Or did he have some other purpose in exploring? With this question in mind, Langdon invited Felix to search the magical jungle together. Thus, the two self-confident fallen quasi-witches entered the magic forest. But in less than half an hour, the two escaped from the inside in a sorry state. While escaping, the two of them were riddled with bloody holes caused by light arrows, and the flowing blood was dyed green by the strange and troublesome foreign energy. Along the way, the two of them had clearly been attacked by many low-tier magical beasts, and there were many claw marks on their bodies. Felix left a teleportation mark at the edge of the jungle, and then the two hurried back to Blissful City. Obviously, they had found some clues in the magical jungle. Inferring from these clues, they concluded that the bastard went straight to the Wizard Tower ruins in the depths of the jungle. And the other party's goal was clear. Obviously, they would not retreat just because of a scary wizard monster guarding the place. So the two deduced that the boy most likely retreated and went back to get reinforcements. The reason why they left a teleportation mark was to catch them off guard when the other party returned to the jungle. If they could block their retreat in time, with the number of fallen apprentices and the terrifying monster in the magical jungle, they might be able to wipe out the entire surface team in one fell swoop. Chapter 94. Grimm, who had successfully returned from the underground world, was once again busy. However, it was different from his usual routine. Now, he had more goals when he was busy and he was more focused. The first thing he did after returning was to visit the Lothar Chamber of Commerce again. When he left, he had 5 high-grade wind crystal cores in his waist pouch. However, such a large purchase also brought a lot of magic crystals to Grimm. More than half of the 3,000 magic crystals he had won from the duel had been spent in the blink of an eye. Now, Grimm's magic crystal reserves had fallen below 800. Considering that he and Mary had become big eaters, they had to keep the magic crystals to support their daily consumption. Therefore, it was urgent to obtain a large amount of magic crystals in a short period of time. After returning from the underground, the 3 of them, who had temporarily formed an alliance to snatch the treasure, gathered together for a meeting. When Grimm told them about what he saw at the Wizard Tower ruins, Mary and Cabby fell into an inexplicable fear. Wizard-level monsters. Was this something that their small team could handle? Although Mary thought highly of herself, she was still just a high-grade vampire. If she really fought against that terrifying flower spirit, she would probably be killed in seconds. Grimm was still an intermediate apprentice. Although his spiritual force was growing rapidly every day with the help of the magic meal and the spirit concentration potion, he was still an intermediate apprentice. If they really encountered a wizard-level monster, not only would he not be able to help, even the aftermath of the battle could cause fatal damage to it. As for the great gnome merchant Cabby, his unique concealment ability was worth watching, but it wasn't related to combat at all. Therefore, other than the past memories in its mind that could help a little, it really couldn't help with anything else. Seeing the fear on the two's faces, Grimm smiled understandingly and began to calmly analyze the advantages and disadvantages of the enemy. With his guidance step by step, the two gradually overcome their fear of wizard-level monsters and began to carefully plan a plan to defeat the terrifying flower spirit. First of all, the 3 were certain that if they allowed the flower spirit to maintain its wizard-level strength, the plan to seize the treasure would simply be suicide. Thus, he had to think of a way to weaken that terrifying flower spirit's power. In order to achieve this, there were 2 ways. One was a witchcraft curse, and the other was the flower spirit itself. As for curses, Grimm could find a way to purchase some cursed wands or single-use magic scrolls. However, it was still unknown whether these inferior goods made by sorcerer apprentices could penetrate the flower spirit's magic resistance, so he could not place too much hope on it. While talking about this, Grimm secretly said that if he could get in touch with Wizard Angus, he might be able to get some wizard-level spell scrolls from him. However, in order to get his hands on an official magus, Grimm had to offer something that could tempt the other party. That was why Grimm had to solve this problem by himself. According to Grimm's speculation, which was actually the AI chip, the main body of the flower spirit was actually the AI chip. It was highly likely that it was hiding near the broken elemental pool. Hence, at this moment, Kirby's usefulness became apparent. Relying on its familiarity with the wizard tower, it quickly drew the internal structure and clearly pointed out the location of the elemental pool. According to Kirby's description, the elemental pool was located on the second underground floor of the wizard tower ruins. Along the way, it would need to pass through many secret witchcraft doors and spell formations. Although most of these things might have lost their effectiveness, if there were one or two that were still working, it could cause immeasurable damage to Mary's infiltration. Therefore, Grimm requested that Kirby follow Mary into the wizard tower ruins. Grimm was very firm on this point, so Kirby could only agree while trembling with fear. In order to achieve the above 2 points, the first prerequisite was that Grimm had to have the strength to fight or deal with the terrifying flower spirit. However, this was extremely dependent on the lightning giant that was about to take shape. Perhaps only when the lightning giant reached the expected height would Mary and KB have a little confidence in this treasure-snatching operation. In the following days, Grimm, Mary, and Kirby all became very busy. Grimm spent day and night in the alchemy laboratory, busy creating his new magic puppet. Mary also went out early and returned late, and every time she did so, she would be covered in scars. Even with the outstanding ability of the vampires to suck blood and revive, she still had so many scars. It was clear that the intensity of her training had reached the limit of what her body could withstand. As for Cabby, who was content with a little bit of wealth and was determined to become the greatest goblin merchant, he rarely appeared in the hall on the first floor. Instead, he wore a set of old and tattered thief equipment and spent every day in the witchcraft training room practicing his special skills of hiding himself. As for his original shiny magic equipment, he could only lock it in a wooden box with tears in his eyes. Of course, during this period, Grimm and Mary also took the time to participate in an underground raid organized by the training camp. However, after experiencing the painful failure last time, the fallen apprentices had obviously strengthened the defense of the various resource points. This caused the team led by Kevin to fall into an extremely difficult battle. In this battle, when the 2 quasi-sorcerers in Kevin's team were locked in a fierce battle with the fallen quasi-sorcerers, Grimm had no choice but to send out a rock python puppet to defend against the attacks of an extra fallen quasi-sorcerer. In a situation where the number of quasi-sorcerers was not as great as the opponents, and the strength of the high apprentices did not have much of an advantage, Kevin could only helplessly give up on the raid in order to avoid being flanked by the enemies. Facing such an ending, the members of the team were very calm. This was because in their past battles of attrition, this was the normal result. As for Grimm's performance in the battle, no one had any objections. With the strength of an intermediate apprentice, he was able to defend against the crazy attacks of a fallen quasi-sorcerer for 15 minutes. Such an achievement would definitely make people speechless. It was also because of his persistence that Kevin's team did not collapse due to the lack of quasi-sorcerers. Otherwise, once the team was broken up, how could those high apprentices dare to guarantee that they would be able to escape? In the dark and gloomy underground tunnels, there were many talented acolytes with wild ambitions. Every year, there would always be more than 10 high apprentices who would silently die in some dark corner of the underground tunnels. Even the death of quasi-sorcerers would occur from time to time. The cause of the destruction of the blissful city by the sorcerers on the surface was that a team of 6 people on the surface had coincidentally encountered a fallen sorcerer while patrolling underground. No one knew the cause of the incident, as 2 quasi-sorcerers and 4 high apprentices had silently died underground. The furious sorcerers on the surface had rushed underground with the help of the sorcerers sent by the Scattered Sorcerer Association in the Tower Forest, forcibly destroying the enemy's stronghold, Blissful City. Unfortunately, the enemy's Tier 2 sorcerer, Pridika, had tactfully detonated his sorcerer tower and escaped from Blissful City with a portion of the fallen sorcerers, avoiding this disaster. Thus, in a few years, a new Blissful City was built. The more they understood about these situations, the more vigilant the elite acolytes were towards large-scale conflicts. Once one side went overboard, it was extremely likely that it would trigger a violent backlash from the other side. In the special environment of the dark underground tunnels, no matter how talented or powerful an acolyte was, once they provoked a sorcerer from the other side, they would only meet their end. Thus, when they had taken the heads of 3 high-level fallen acolytes in one go, Kevin's team was already somewhat jittery. This time they had been disgraced, which made the 2 quasi-sorcerers in the team heave a sigh of relief. As a passer-by in the dark underground tunnels, it was impossible for Grimm to stay here for too long. Thus, he had no way of understanding these thoughts. The reason why he had concealed his strength this time was purely due to his lack of stamina and spiritual force. Over the past few days, Grimm had once again taken the concentration potion. This time, his spiritual force had only increased by 0.51 points. On the other hand, his vitality had fallen below 3 points. This caused the AI chip's evaluation of his body to change from healthy to weak. Left with no choice, Grimm could only stop taking the concentration potion and focus on adjusting his body. With his vigorous vitality at the age of 15 and the stimulation of his physical body by his spiritual force, it was normal for his vitality to be around 4 to 5 points. However, this was a common problem for all acolytes who walked the path of the elemental path. Usually, they would only focus on training and cultivating their spiritual force. If they were not meditating, they would study and study magic, or spend long periods of time copying magic books. For the sake of magic experiments, they would spend long periods of time in contact with magic materials that were harmful to their bodies. These bad habits also caused all elemental acolytes to look the same, sickly and skinny. If they could successfully advance to become a sorcerer, they would naturally have a lot of time and methods to find some strange items to fill the gap in their bodies. But now they could only grit their teeth and endure it bitterly. They even sacrificed their bodies time and time again in exchange for a slight improvement in their mental strength. The failure of the mission did not affect Grimm at all. After returning from the underground tunnels, he continued to dive into the alchemy laboratory. He spent most of his time there, carefully polishing the number 1 magic puppet that he was looking forward to the most, the lightning giant. Finally, after more than 10 days of suffering, Grimm waved his hand to extinguish the magic flames on the alchemy table. He raised the main crystal core that acted as the carrier of the magic puppet's consciousness and squinted his eyes to carefully examine it. At this moment, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief because... Chapter 95. This was a masterpiece that could topple all puppeteers' understanding of art. The dazzling main crystal core was almost transparent under the bright light. The irregular surface of the main crystal core was engraved with dense, thin, spiderweb-like magic veins that looked like the veins of the main crystal core. As the elemental energy around it vibrated, tiny golden arcs of lightning started to appear, swimming around the crystal's smooth surface. Every time it made a circle, it would absorb more lightning elements from the surrounding space, and the golden arcs of lightning would become stronger and stronger. In the end, a blinding lightning storm started to engulf the main crystal core. Although it wasn't powerful, the aura of refinement was shocking. Grim pinched the main crystal core with 2 fingers. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. His heart was filled with endless pride. This main crystal core was the key to forming the lightning giant. In order to make space for more refinement and strengthening spell formations, the spell formations that absorbed and stored energy had been transferred to the other 5 wind crystal cores. Even so, when the main crystal core was exposed to the air, the lightning elements were uncontrollably attracted to it, creating the strange scene before him. Grim put his right hand together, dispersing the chaotic lightning element. He placed his right hand in front of his forehead, silently connecting to the imprint of consciousness inside the main crystal core. It could be said that the imprint of consciousness on the main crystal core was the most important core spell formation. Grim had used this imprint of consciousness to obtain control of the future lightning giant. Very smoothly, Grim's mental power penetrated the imprint of consciousness and resonated with a trace of mental power that was left in it. When this process was completed, the imprint of consciousness on the main crystal core was activated. From then on, no one would be able to take control of it away from Grim. Of course, this was a necessary process for private puppets. Puppeteers often needed to control golems or puppets, so most of them would change the imprint of consciousness to runes. Puppeteers would make control runes into tokens and amulets that were easy to carry and transfer, and then sell them publicly. Anyone who held the control runes could give orders to golems or puppets. From this point of view, the golems were far less loyal than the demonic puppets. The satisfied Grim had just returned to the entrance of his residence when he bumped into Mary, who was dragging her tired body back. Although she was wearing a red dress, Mary's body was covered with terrifying scars. Even her pretty and delicate face was covered with wounds. What's wrong? In the past few days, Grim had been busy with his magic puppet and did not have time to pay attention to Mary's every move, so he was shocked by her injury. It's just a small injury. That bastard's injuries are worse than mine. If it wasn't for the fact that it could help me master magic battle techniques, I would have sucked it dry long ago. Mary waved her hand fiercely and cursed while gnashing her teeth. Although she sounded powerful, Grim, who was familiar with her character, dared to say that she would definitely lose in a fight. Mary, you've been going to the Kreela Mountains recently. Can you help me find a suitable opponent to practice with? It's best if it's a quasi-wizard, and one that can keep secrets. Grim said hesitantly. Your lightning giant is ready? Mary's eyes lit up. Yes, but I haven't tested it yet. As for its strength, that's good. Let's go and help me get revenge. Mary, who had been living in dire straits recently, always had the flame of revenge burning in her heart. However, the idea of leading a group of people to attack an enemy had never crossed her mind. Hearing Grim's request, she did not have time to go back to her room to treat her injuries. Instead, she turned around and rushed out of the wizard tower with him. She did not care about the strange gazes of the wizard apprentices around her. As soon as they rushed out of the wizard tower, Mary flapped her wings and transformed into a giant vampire bat. She grabbed Grim's shoulders and flew into the sky. At this moment, it was already dusk. There was still a trace of fiery clouds in the dark sky. The Kreela Mountains in the distance were like a sleeping giant, lying on the edge of the dark sky. Mary was flying towards the depths of the mountains. Since the last time Mary drank Alice's blood, her strength and physique had greatly improved. In the past, it was very difficult for her to fly with Grim on her back. She almost always glided at the treetop. But now, when she flapped her leathery bat wings with all her might, she brought Grim almost 100 meters into the sky and flew forward as fast as an arrow. The damp night breeze with a hint of coldness slapped against his face. The strong wind that blew against his face forced Grim to close his eyes. He had no choice but to put on the gnome engineering goggles again, which made his situation a little better. With the help of the dim light of the goggles, he looked down at the ground. At the edge of the dark forest, There were countless torches in a long line hurrying towards the wizard tower. These should be the exploration teams that went into the depths of the mountains every day to hunt for magic beasts and to search for magic potions. While Grim was still pondering, Mary had already brought him across the night sky and flew over the heads of the exploration teams. The sky was not completely dark yet. Some of the exploration teams on the ground had obviously noticed the abnormality in the sky. Under their shouts, a few team leaders also raised their heads and looked into the sky. But before they could find the small black dot in the dark sky, Mary had already brought Grim into the depths of the forest. The place that Mary was heading to was more than 70 kilometers away from the wizard tower. If it was on the ground, it would take at least half a day to cross this part of the forest on foot. But for Mary, it would only take her 3/4 of an hour. This was a small hill near a tall mountain range. Mary brought Grim to this place, and began to slowly descend. On the hill there was an open space the size of half a football field. Although it was also full of weeds and shrubs, it was scattered all over the place. It was obvious that it had been trampled on by the foot. She threw Grim on the grass, and the red smoke of the vampire bat exploded. In the blink of an eye, she turned back into Red Mary. "Toriel, you bastard, get out here! I, Red Mary, have come for revenge." As soon as she returned to her human form, Mary put her hands on her waist and roared. Her shrill and sharp voice reverberated in the dark forest, and one could faintly hear the echoes in the distance. What was she doing? At this moment, Grim's mind was in a mess. He found Mary's actions extremely funny. He had long heard that Mary was looking for suitable opponents to practice her close combat skills, but no matter how urgent she was, she should not have come to such a desolate forest to look for one. What else could she find here other than wild beasts and magic beasts? It couldn't be that her practice opponents were magic beasts, right? Filled with endless imagination, Grim shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was about to stop Mary's nonsense, but with a deep sigh, a tall and strong figure came out of the forest and appeared on the high hill. Black clouds floated in the sky, and a silver moon emerged from the clouds, shining bright moonlight on the figure of the opponent. It was a well-built man with a well-proportioned body. He had dark green eyes, a cold face, and a full set of green armor. It was obvious that he was a powerful person who specialized in close combat. When he first appeared, he had a gentle smile on his face. It was obvious that he wanted to have a good chat with Mary. However, when he realized that Mary was not alone on the high hill, his expression turned cold. He stared at Grim from afar, trying to figure out something. "Toriel, I've said it before. If you want me to be your woman, then you have to defeat me sincerely. Today, I've found you an opponent. As long as you can defeat him, I'll agree to your request. How about it? That's not too harsh, is it? You're not afraid of an intermediate acolyte, are you?" Mary shouted with her hands on her waist, completely ignoring Grim's dumbfounded expression. Since when did Mary have a suitor? From the looks of it, he should also be an acolyte, but why did he live in the wilderness? Looking at his strength, Grim could not help but furrow his brows. This fellow's spiritual undulations were very strange, but the AI chip's feedback proved that he was a quasi-magus. While Grim was observing the other party, the man in green armor was also silently sizing him up. "You keep saying that you have a man, don't tell me it's this weak little guy?" His spiritual fluctuations are so chaotic, it's probably because he's using drugs to forcefully raise it. His spiritual undulations are so chaotic, it's probably because of drugs. Will he be able to withstand your ecstatic kisses? With his weak body, can he withstand a few of your breaths? The man in green armor became more and more furious as he spoke, and in the end, he was unable to restrain his anger. "Oh, a love rival has actually come knocking on my door. *T love rival. At most, I have a little ambiguous relationship with Mary. They are not even lovers, so how can I be a love rival?" Grim had a strange smile on his face as he looked at the man in green armor. However, before he could even tease him, the man's body underwent an unbelievable change. The man in green armor's body slowly expanded, causing the loose armor on his body to creak. Countless thick black hairs drilled out from under his skin, and his face began to twist and contort as two sharp fangs angrily emerged from his mouth. The most eye-catching thing was his eyes. The two balls of dark green light grew brighter and brighter, until they covered the silver moon in the sky, causing Grimm's heart to feel stifled. Chapter 96. Bloodline Transformation. This was a prospective sorcerer walking the path of a bloodline sorcerer. It would be a lie to say that he was not nervous at this moment. After all, in the eyes of all acolytes, bloodline acolytes were the strongest among their peers. Take this guy in front of him for example. According to historical records, the giant berserk ape was a powerful magic beast with a life force of rank 5. This meant that as long as this guy continued to purify his giant berserk ape bloodline, he would have the potential to become a rank 5 sorcerer. If he was lucky enough to reach rank 5, he would have to worry about his future. But now, he could fully enjoy the great benefits brought by the bloodline transformation. Strong physique, powerful strength, tall and mighty body, as well as fearlessness towards death, the desire to fight until one's last breath. Under the stimulation of the giant berserk ape bloodline, the green-armored man's consciousness was in a mess. He beat his chest with his giant hands and roared at Grimm. Well, this was probably the only flaw of the bloodline. It was easy to fall into the restlessness of the bloodline and lose the rationality and calmness that acolytes should have. Of course, there were some bloodline fanatics who did not see this as a flaw. From their point of view, the berserk desire for battle could stimulate their desire for battle, allowing them to unleash more power. Compared to this, losing some brains was nothing. Don't you need to prepare? Be careful, this guy will not recognize anyone once he transforms. Mary smiled and left the high hill. I'm looking forward to your next performance. Grimm looked up at the indomitable giant berserk ape and shook his head with a bitter smile. Finally, he took a small leather bag from his waist and threw it on the ground. As the bag opened, a dazzling magic light shone from within. Asterisk whoosh whoosh whoosh, asterisk 5 sparkling high-grade wind-type crystal cores flew out of the bag and began to slowly condense in the air. As soon as they appeared in the air, an ear-piercing sound of wind suddenly rang out from the high hill. Under the guidance of a mysterious force, a huge amount of wind elements frantically surged towards the motionless elemental crystal cores and began to revolve around them. The wind was invisible. The particles of the wind were also invisible. But when such a large amount of wind elements gathered together, the green whirlpool became visible to the naked eye. The wind element came so quickly that the dark night sky was cut into thousands of strands. The gathered wind elements quickly condensed into a humanoid body and 4 limbs with the 5 wind-type crystal cores as the center. It had a green body and green limbs. After the green giant's body was formed, a new elemental crystal core flew out of the cloth bag and flew into the giant's wide chest. In the next second, a green head squeezed out from the top of the giant's sturdy body. However, his face was rather blurry, with no eyes, ears, mouth, or nose. If the previous 5 high-level wind magic cores were only used to build the body, then this quasi-magus level wind magic core was used to support the body. It was used to build the cyan giant's bones. However, this was not the end. A small sun rose from the cloth bag. The bright and dazzling elemental fluorescence, and the crackling lightning barrier. As soon as the last main magic core was integrated into the body of the cyan giant, it brought an indescribable magical change to it. If the giant from before was still lifeless, then at this moment, it was alive. The giant body was 5 meters tall, its skin was green, but its body was covered with a layer of golden armor. Although its limbs were not as slender and flexible as human beings, it had arms, palms, and fingers. When 2 small golden suns appeared on its eyebrows, A magic shield that was purely made of static lightning appeared in its left hand, and a blinding lightning spear appeared in its right hand. Together with the wind vortex shield and lightning armor outside the giant's body, its individual defensive means had reached an astonishing level. The lightning element itself was a mutated branch of the wind element, therefore, the combination of the lightning element was not a problem at all. The 5 wind magic cores scattered on the giant's body and limbs were continuously gathering wind element. Except for a part of the wind element that was condensed into a solid body of wind, the rest of the wind elements were continuously strengthened by the main magic core, and then turned into lightning energy, supplying the lightning giant's bottomless demand. The 4 meters tall giant ape and the 5 meters tall lightning giant, these 2 giants were facing each other coldly with a distance of 30 to 40 meters between them. Although the giant ape that the man in green armor had transformed into seemed to be reckless and violent, when facing a powerful opponent with unknown power, it also showed considerable restraint and seriousness. However, the heavy pressure brought by the lightning giant also stimulated the ape, making it more and more manic. Scorching white smoke puffed out of its thick nostrils, and its huge, millstone-like hands hammered the ground, making loud bangs. Finally, the giant ape could no longer suppress the raging battle intent in its body. It raised its neck and let out a roar that shook the forest, swaying its huge body as it charged forward. Grim kept retreating. While he was retreating, he stared at the berserk ape with blue lights flashing in his eyes. Rows of numbers fell from the top of his head like a waterfall. His eyes were filled with a sea of data. But soon, most of the irrelevant data was discarded, leaving only the AI chip's scan of the giant ape's data. Character, Toriel. Gender, male. Sorcerer route, bloodline. Attributes. Strength 20 plus 2. Vitality 20 plus 2. Agility 11. Spirit 17 minus 3. Grim's eyes were filled with awe and envy when he saw the statistics of his body. Strength 20. This kind of strength was probably enough to defeat all the magical beasts in the Cray Mountain range. Vitality 20. With this kind of physique, even if Toriel did not wear any armor, his physical strength was enough to withstand the attacks of all the ordinary weapons in the world. Those ordinary weapons that did not have extraordinary powers could no longer cause any harm to him. Grim even suspected that with 20 points of vitality, even if someone really chopped off one of his arms, he would be able to regrow it in a few days. This was because creatures with 20 points of vitality seemed to have the hidden benefit of limb regeneration. Based on the data scanned by the AI chip, Toriel's usual stats should be Strength 18, Vitality 18, Agility 11, Spirit 20. Once he completed the bloodline transformation, his strength and vitality would increase to 20 points, but his spiritual force would drop to 17 points. Perhaps this was one of the flaws of the giant ape's bloodline. Although Grim's thoughts seemed to take a long time, in reality, it was all done in a flash. While Grim kept retreating, the lightning giant chose to face the giant ape head-on. With a shake of its hand, the lightning giant threw a lightning spear at the giant ape's broad chest at a speed that the naked eye could not capture. The sudden explosion of a small lightning storm instantly enveloped the giant ape's body. In Grim's visual projection, the basic strength of this small lightning storm was 21 points. However, this level of lightning damage was not enough to stop a powerful magical creature with 20 points of vitality and strength. Through the transformation, Toriel temporarily gained the incomparably strong body and magic resistance of the berserk ape. Although the crackling electric currents and electric arcs that enveloped his body brought him intense pain, they could not stop him from moving. With a strong gust of wind, the giant ape's huge body broke through the lightning storm and swung its fan-like hand at the lightning giant. Compared to the giant ape's wild strength, the lightning giant was much larger, but it was much more agile. With a slight movement, the lightning giant dodged the giant ape's hand and appeared behind it in an instant. With a shake of its right hand, a lightning whip flew out and wrapped around the giant ape's waist. Violent and ferocious high-voltage electricity instantly passed through the lightning whip to every corner of the giant ape's body, causing it to roar endlessly. The area where the whip wrapped around the ape emitted a burning smell of flesh. The ape's first attack was a failure, and the sharp pain from its body stimulated it even more. It reached out to grab the whip at its waist and tore it into pieces with a single tug. The giant ape turned around and punched with both its fists. The fierce fists tore through the air and hit the lightning giant in an instant. Although the lightning giant had double protection from the wind vortex shield and the lightning shield on its left hand, the lightning giant's outer layer of protection was instantly broken under the extreme power of the giant ape. There was a loud explosion. The lightning giant drew a green and white trail in the air, and only stabilized itself after flying for nearly 100 meters. At this moment, the front part of its left hand had disappeared, and the golden armor on its chest had a huge dent. Grim, who had retreated to the edge of the forest in the distance, frowned. Compared to the bloodline transformation that had a physical body, the lightning giant's body that was condensed from the wind element was too weak. It was obviously at a disadvantage in close combat against such a big fellow that relied mainly on strength and physical strength. However, with the two external layers of protection, the lightning giant's iron fist did not penetrate the lightning giant's basic defense. Otherwise, it would be much more troublesome to recover. In the blink of an eye, the huge dent on the lightning giant's chest flashed with a golden light, and it returned to normal. At this moment, the furious giant ape once again rushed forward with rumbling footsteps. Don't fight it in close combat. Maintain a distance of 30 to 50 meters and use lightning attacks. Chapter 97. Two giants fighting in a dark, empty, and silent forest. Such a scene had never appeared in Grimm's memory before. But today, it had become a reality in this mysterious and unfathomable world. The gigantic berserk ape was like a bulldozer that never knew exhaustion. It forcefully flattened the nearby mountain forest. Even the ground was filled with deep footprints and fine cracks like spider webs. On the other hand, the lightning giant with a green body and golden armor was like a nimble elf, constantly wandering around the giant ape, provoking it to pounce on it while attacking it with lightning spears and wind blades. As the battle continued, the information Grimm collected about the lightning giant became clearer and clearer. Although he had created the lightning giant himself, he had only been using it as a human-shaped spiritual force projector. He knew nothing about its principles and knowledge. Therefore, the AI chip only had a rough estimate of the lightning giant's combat ability and body data. It was far less detailed than the information he had collected from the battlefield. Lightning giant, peak quasi-wizard, lightning and wind element. Stats: Strength 12, Vitality 11, Agility 18, Spirit 20, Mastered Skills. Wind Vortex, passive. Thunder Armor, passive. Lightning Shield, active. Lightning Spear, active. Lightning Whip, active. Wind Blade, active. Cloud Storm, active. Chain Lightning, active. Lightning Leap, active. This was a long-range magic puppet that mainly relied on agility. Although its strength and vitality were a little weak, its numerous attack skills made up for these shortcomings. It became the most powerful elemental magic puppet under Grimm's command. The strength it displayed did not disappoint Grimm's expectations. In the following battles, the lightning giant relied on its agility to move around the giant ape, constantly attacking it with lightning spears and wind blade. No matter how angry the giant ape pounced, it could not catch up to the lightning giant. After the giant berserk ape's pounce failed, it quickly revealed its terrifying combat talents, namely soul-tearing roar and rock toss. The former could make use of a violent roar to instantly stun the enemies around it, causing them to be in a soulless state for 3 to 5 seconds. Of course, this skill could also instantly kill any ordinary person without the protection of witchcraft. The range of the skill was 50 meters. The second skill allowed the giant ape to condense an irregular rock with a diameter of 2 meters between its palms, and then instantly throw it at its opponent. The tremendous force added to it was enough to easily smash the tall body of the lightning giant that it was so proud of. Although the berserk giant ape's bloodline abilities were rare, they complemented its powerful physique. Any enemy who was affected by the soul-splitting roar would not be able to escape the wild and ferocious close-range attack if they were distracted for a moment. But it was a pity that such a spiritual attack was useless against the elemental puppet. Hence, the great berserker ape could only follow behind the lightning giant in a futile attempt. It kept pouncing on the lightning giant like a madman, knocking down and smashing countless trees, but it could not even touch the lightning giant's body. Just when Grim thought that he would be able to win today's battle, Toriel, who had transformed into a berserk ape, suddenly abandoned the lightning giant that was hard to catch and charged at Grim with a roar. Cough. Grim sighed silently. Anyone who could become a wizard apprentice was not stupid. Toriel had been angered by the lightning giant, and the power of his bloodline had muddled his thoughts. Now that his attacks were futile, Toriel regained control of the great ape's body. Of course, he would not foolishly chase after the lightning giant and eat the wind. Instead, he directly targeted Grim, the instigator of all this. As long as he could take down Grim, that bastard that was always floating around him would naturally vanish. Even if he could not directly attack Grim, he could at least lure that bastard to his side. That way, he would be able to unleash his wild strength. With this simple thought, the great berserk ape's eyes turned red. He slammed his fists on the ground and leaped towards Grim. How could Grim not see through his opponent's thoughts? The lightning giant's battle strength was indeed outstanding, but it had a fatal flaw. That was because its controller was too weak. And Grim was the easiest weakness in the great ape's body. Using the lightning giant to block the muzzle was undoubtedly the worst choice. With the giant berserk ape's close combat ability, perhaps it would only take a dozen or so fingers to smash its body into smithereens and damage the elemental crystal core inside. Grim looked at his stats. Summoning the lightning giant had consumed 7 points of his spiritual force, and he had less than 6 points left. Grim looked at the ferocious great ape that was pouncing towards him. Feeling the violent tremors under his feet, Grim threw out another crystal-clear elemental crystal core. "Come out, my rock python nest!" Following Grim's loud roar, the ground in front of him suddenly split open into a bottomless ravine, and a terrifying serpent made of pure rock wriggled out of the ground. The rock python was right in the path of the great berserk ape. Its thick body coiled around the giant ape's body, and its rock-like body quickly coiled around the giant ape's body. In the next second, the terrifying scene of King Kong fighting the rock python unfolded before Grim's eyes. Unfortunately, the explosive and wild battle did not allow him to watch this cool scene from a close distance. Instead, he had to escape from the terrifying scene as if his life depended on it. Sand and pebbles flew, ancient trees were broken, and grass was scattered. A huge cloud of dust quickly spread in all directions. Countless gravel fragments shot out like bullets, causing the surrounding forest to tremble. When the dust cleared up a little, Grim finally stopped. The green glow of the boots of swiftness on his feet gradually dissipated, and he had already escaped half a mile away. Turning back to look at the battlefield that was shaking the mountains, the lightning giant was standing in the air with both hands raised high. Above its majestic body, a funnel-like, slow-spinning thundercloud was rapidly forming, and the bottom of the funnel was pointing straight at the giant ape that was fighting wildly. Although it was in the middle of a fierce battle, the great ape quickly noticed the abnormality above its head. It tried its best to leave the position locked by the cloud storm, but unfortunately, the rock python that it had smashed into pieces was tightly wrapped around its lower limbs. No matter how hard it smashed it, it would not loosen its grip. Soon, the cloud storm, which had been guided for more than 20 seconds, was finally completed. the dark night sky was suddenly split in half by a huge bolt of lightning that pierced through the heavens and the earth, and the whole world was reflected in a white light. Raging, scorching electric currents wandered wantonly on the ape and the serpent's bodies. The frighteningly powerful lightning energy broke the blood-red life shield around the ape's body and directly sank into the ape's enormous body. In the next second, the violent energy that could not be vented blasted a huge hole in the great ape's thick back. Blood splashed out like a waterfall, but before it could fall to the ground, it was evaporated by the violent lightning energy in the air. Even with the great ape's strong body, it could not withstand such a wild attack. It roared angrily at the sky. Under the continuous attack of the thunderstorm, the giant berserk ape finally turned over and fell to the ground. Its muscular body slowly returned to the form of the green-armored man. Hurry up, hurry up! Let your puppet collect some of his blood for me." It was unknown when Mary had appeared beside Grim, but when she saw the dust settle in the distance, she seemed even more excited than Grim. Grim turned his head and looked at Mary, whose face was blushing. He knew that he had been used by her. But this ending was not bad. She got the blood, and he got the most ideal combat data. Everyone was happy. The only one who suffered was probably the inexplicably powerful prospective wizard Toriel. Grim had no intention of killing Toriel. This was the range of the wizard tower's power. Toriel could live in seclusion here, so he must have a deep connection with the wizards in the wizard tower. It was already too much to beat Toriel half to death for no reason. If he took the opportunity to kill Toriel, Grim was afraid that before he could return to the wizard tower, he would be ambushed on his way back. Grim secretly gave the lightning giant an order, then turned around and began to run away with Mary. His senses were very sharp. From the moment the two monsters started fighting, there were 7 or 8 hidden and powerful mental waves lurking around the battlefield. Among them, there was no lack of mental waves that Wizard Angus was slightly familiar with. Therefore, the lightning giant, who was standing in midair, waved his hand to disperse the gathering cloud storm. He turned into a dazzling ray of lightning and chased after Grim. The rock python that was abandoned on the battlefield struggled to loosen its grip on the unconscious green-armored man. It dragged its broken body across the grass and chased after Grim. No one noticed that before leaving, the rock python had secretly swallowed the soil that was mixed with a large amount of blood under the green-armored man's body. When the battlefield became quiet again, 2 black shadows suddenly appeared beside the green-armored man. After bending down to check, one of the shadows shook his head and sighed. "Toriel is a descendant of your family. What, you just let that kid go like that?" The other shadow was hidden in the thick black smoke. Only 2 clusters of strange fireflies lit up between his eyebrows. He coldly said, "Humph, if it wasn't for Angus, do you think anyone could leave alive after bullying a member of the Wharton family?" "Angus? That's right. He's on duty in the wizard tower these days. Could it be that this kid is a new descendant of his family?" The first shadow asked doubtfully, "Isn't he afraid of starting a war between the wizard families by letting his descendant go out and cause trouble?" "Humph, that person is not from his family at all. He seems to be a little guy sent here by the Wizard Association to gain experience. There's such a good seedling among the newcomers today. When I finish my witchcraft experiment, I'll have to do a thorough check." The two exchanged a few words, then nodded and parted ways. The first shadow quickly disappeared into the forest, while the other shadow bent down and picked up Toriel. With a burst of black smoke, they also disappeared. Chapter 98. He was on tenterhooks along the way, but the journey back to the wizard tower was quite smooth. When Grim used a secret spell to disperse the lightning giant's huge body of wind elemental energy, the towering elemental puppet turned into 7 crystal-clear magic cores in the blink of an eye. Without waiting for Grim to put them away, Mary rushed forward and snatched them into her hands. She stroked them over and over again as if she couldn't bear to part with them. After a while, as if she felt that just looking at them was not enough to express her love, Mary picked up the main core and gently rubbed it on her face, quietly feeling the slight numbness from the lightning that bloomed on her face. Ugh! Seeing this, Grim could not help but frown. Come on, these things look beautiful and pure, but in fact they are battle puppets that kill without batting an eyelid. Mary had just seen its violent and cruel side, yet she was still reluctant to part with it. This made Grim feel that there were not many normal people on the path of a magus. Holding back the endless ridicule in his heart, Grim finally took back his #1 magic puppet from Mary and threw a ball of blood crystals to her. With the rock python's control of the earth element, it was not a problem to remove the mud from the pool of blood. He could only hope that Toriel's strength did not fall too much after losing so much blood. Otherwise, he would have gained a mortal enemy for nothing in the future. After the battle, the lightning giant's crystal cores were fine, but the rock python puppet's summoning crystal core was seriously damaged. The most direct result of using a high-level rock python devil puppet to tangle with a powerful bloodline quasi-sorcerer was that after Grim dispelled the devil puppet's body, he found that the summoning crystal core he had picked up was in a state of chaos, and its magical aura was surging. It was no longer of much use. Grim carefully examined it for a long time. When the AI chip confirmed that the crystal core could no longer be repaired, he could only regretfully put it away. After tidying up everything at the edge of the mountain range, the two quietly returned to the Magus Tower. However, just as the two of them were about to step into the gate of the Wizard Tower, a pair of gargoyle statues squatting on both sides of the gate suddenly moved their bodies. The gargoyle on the left crouched down from the stone platform and stared at Grim with its stone eyes. The gargoyle squeaked as its limbs rubbed against each other. "Hey, little fella, Enforcer Lord Angus wants you to go to his residence immediately." As soon as it finished speaking, it retracted its body and returned to its previous pouncing posture, motionless and silent. Grim was startled. He had been going in and out of this place many times, and every time, he would see the pair of gargoyles guarding the entrance. However, he didn't expect them to be puppets, and wizards at that. It seemed that this seemingly defenseless public Magus Tower was not as weak as he thought. As a result, the rest of the journey became a terrifying journey that made one's hair stand on end. Wherever Grim and Mary went, the seemingly inanimate statues and the shepherdesses hanging on both sides of the corridor would all come to life, repeating the same words. "Quick, go find Wizard Angus." Faced with these prompts, if the two of them still did not know that they were being watched by Wizard Angus, they would really be fools. However, this was what scared the two of them the most. They had no idea what method Angus was using to monitor them. Thus, in a depressing atmosphere, the two of them walked into Angus' residence on the 5th floor of the Magus Tower. Wizard Angus met them in the laboratory. It was not as gloomy as he had imagined, nor was there any blood flowing everywhere. This official Magus private laboratory was clean and tidy. The lights were bright, and it had the style of a high-grade laboratory. However, Grim could feel a glaring red glow in many bottles and jars. Whether it was a lively little animal or a single magic organ, they all emitted a strong energy aura. This Wizard Angus was obviously concocting some kind of special magic potion. The laboratory table in front of him was filled with sulfurization bottles and reagents of different sizes. When the two of them arrived at the laboratory, Angus was gently shaking a sulfurization test tube in his hand. From time to time, he would raise it in front of his eyes to observe it carefully. The test tube contained some blue mysterious potion. Every time Angus shook it, the blue potion inside would bubble and transform into various forms of sea creatures. Sometimes it was a mermaid riding a seahorse, sometimes it was a demon whale waving its tail and spraying water, and sometimes it was a group of silver swordfish jumping and chasing each other. In short, every time the test tube shook, they would change into different forms, appearing strange and mysterious. Mary had never been able to resist such magical things, but she could not act presumptuously in an official wizard's laboratory. She could only move her mouth to ask Grim. Perhaps Mary's rank was far higher than Grim's, but when it came to knowledge of magic and how to use it effectively, Grim was more than 3 streets ahead of her. The blood of the deep-sea mermaids. Grim also mouthed the same thing. Only the blood of the deep-sea mermaids in the deepest part of the endless ocean could have this special hallucinogenic effect. That's right, the magical scene they saw just now was not real. It was just the power of the illusion that was triggered by the slight vibration of the blue blood. After a while, Wizard Angus put down the test tube in his hand and turned around to stare at the two of them. Just now, the head of the Wharton family protested to me, saying that your reckless behavior has damaged the dignity of their family. He asked me to hand you over to them to deal with. Do you think I should listen to his suggestion? Mary frowned. She really did not know how to answer. She tilted her head and stared at Grim, signaling him to answer with her eyes. Grim smiled and bowed. Dear Lord Angus, as far as I know, the patriarch of the Wharton family is an ordinary person. As a normal person, what right does he have to give you orders? If they really want me and Mary's life to atone for their crime, then the wizard behind them will personally ask for it. Wizard Angus also squinted his eyes and looked at the pair in front of him in surprise. Vampire and puppet master. Not only that, but they were also elite vampires and intermediate puppet masters. But what made him surprised was that the core of this team was this weak intermediate wizard apprentice. Was it because of this kid's excellent potential as a puppet master? Or was there some other reason? Otherwise, why would that elite vampire girl be willing to give up her right to speak? It had to be known that acolytes who were able to walk the path of a magus were never good people. They were all arrogant and conceited, ambitious people who placed themselves at the center of everything. Asking them to be humble and kind to the weak was simply the biggest joke in the world. Therefore, whenever a sorcerer needed to form a team with someone else, the most powerful person in the team would be the leader, and everyone else would follow their lead. This was even more obvious among the apprentices, so Angus showed great interest in this team. Kid, just relying on your mouth is useless. You've messed with Toriel, the most promising wizard of the Wharton family. I heard that because of your reckless behavior, that guy's advancement will be delayed by at least 3 years. Now the people of the Wharton family are going crazy, and they are looking for you everywhere. I'm afraid that when you walk out of here, there will be a group of people waiting to capture you and take the reward. Wizard Angus sneered with evil intentions. Grim's heart tightened, but he was more helpless than anything. If the Wharton family was really as strong as Wizard Angus said, they might not even have the chance to step into the wizard tower before they could even be captured. Now that Angus had said this, and his words were so threatening, he was afraid that they would be forced to walk into the trap. Facing the threat of an official wizard, what choice could these 2 little wizard apprentices make? Honorable Mr. Angus, Mary and I are just little wizard apprentices. Of course, we will listen to everything you say. Is there anything we can do for you? Seeing Grim being so tactful, Wizard Angus let out a satisfied smile. Take out your puppet and let me have a look. Without saying anything, Grim cupped his hands and handed it over. Using his fingers to pinch a few crystal cores, Angus's smile became even wider. It seems like you made it yourself. Yes. I'll give you 3 years. Can you become a wizard? Wizard Angus suddenly changed the topic. Grim was so shocked that he couldn't say anything. Even Mary couldn't help but widen her eyes. There's nothing to be surprised about. I can only protect you for 3 years at most. Once that Toriel becomes a wizard first, I won't have any reason to stop him from taking revenge on you. As for the clamor of his family, it won't affect me. After all, you defeated him in a fair fight. If the family had to step in for this, then the Wharton family would lose all their face. But Mary and I are willing to pay any price for your protection. Do you have any orders? It's so easy to talk to a smart guy like you. Here, this is a wizard contract. Sign it. Don't worry, I don't care about your current strength. Once you sign this contract, you will be signing a contract with the Byron family. I can use the family's name to protect you from the Wharton family for 3 years. What do I have to pay for this? Chapter 99. So you're saying that the minimum requirement for this competition is to become an official wizard? Could it be? Could it be? Grimm's voice was a little hesitant. There seemed to be some information about this in the wizard world. That's right. I want you to participate in the Arcane Wizard Ranking Competition that will be held in Sky City in 5 years. As long as you can help us, the Byron family, to maintain our sales rights in Sky City, we will give you a huge gift. I understand what you mean. What you need is a promise. As long as I promise to become an official wizard in 3 years and represent your Byron family in the competition, you will protect us for 3 years. This deal is what we both need the most. It is a fair trade between wizards, so I'm willing to accept it. Hee, that's good. Remember, you only have 3 years. Once that Toriel becomes an official wizard, our contract will be invalid. After all, no one wants to become enemies with a bloodline wizard who is good at fighting. Understood, I will definitely advance before he does. Grimm vowed. Seeing Grimm's sincere expression, Wizard Angus waved his hand, and a ball of grey smoke exploded in front of Grimm. In an instant it condensed into a spell contract. Grimm took a step forward and carefully looked through this spell contract 3 to 4 times. Only when he was sure that there were no traps of words or patterns did he carefully leave his spell imprint on it. Under normal circumstances, spellcasters did not like to leave their soul imprint when they signed a contract. Although it was more binding, it was easy for their soul aura to fall into the hands of others. Therefore, in order to deal with this situation, wizards created a spell imprint. It was a combination of a person's special will wave and elemental energy to condense their own special imprint. This way, they would not have to worry about their aura being used by their enemies, and they could guarantee that outsiders could not fake it. Therefore, it was accepted by all spellcasters. The witchcraft imprint that Grimm had set for himself was a flaming iron fist that rose into the sky. The flame on the iron fist represented his natural affinity with fire, and the iron fist represented his strength. It also represented the wild ambition that was growing in Grimm's heart. After taking back the contract, Wizard Angus threw Grimm a badge that represented the Byron family on his chest. Wear this. As long as you are in the Dagon area, no one will dare to provoke you. Alright, you guys can leave. As soon as the deal was done, Wizard Angus chased Grimm and Magus out. To him, this was just one of the countless backup plans he had made for his family. It was not enough for him to treat it seriously. An intermediate acolyte wanting to become an official magus in 3 years was something he had heard many times, but those who could actually make it to that stage were few and far between. Therefore, before that little fellow becomes a true magus, everything else is just a pawn. When Grimm and Mary respectfully left Angus' residence, they were shocked to find more than 20 elite acolytes gathered in front of the residence. They were divided into 2 factions, confronting each other. When Grimm appeared, the leaders of the 2 factions looked at him at the same time. When they glanced at the badge pinned on Grimm's chest, the expressions of the 2 leaders changed at the same time. One of them gritted his teeth in anger, while the other was full of smiles and even took the initiative to hug Grimm's shoulder. What? You can see it now. Kevin's face was full of schadenfreude. Grimm is already a member of the Byron family. Why aren't you guys leaving yet? What are you all standing here for? Grimm vaguely remembered seeing the leader of the other faction in the training camp. If he remembered correctly, he was called Hammer. He was also a quasi-wizard. However, looking at the unconcealed wave of his will, it was obvious that he was much weaker than Toriel. Grimm. Very good. Hammer threatened fiercely. You're smart enough to know to hide under Lord Angus's protection. Otherwise, I, Hammer, will definitely let you know the consequences of provoking the Wharton family." Grim let out a cold laugh. "The reason I joined the Byron family was because of Wizard Angus's love for me. He did not want me to fall under the sinister schemes of those shameless people. However, I'm not afraid of a coward like you who only knows how to act tough with your mouth. Since you are willing to avenge Toriel, why don't we find a fair fight tomorrow? As long as you can defeat me in a fair fight, I am willing to give up the protection of Lord Angus. How about it, do you dare?" You, arrogant, impudent. In that moment, all the elite apprentices behind Hammer could not help but shout out with righteous indignation. Although Hammer kept shouting, his eyes were flickering and his face was gloomy. It was obvious that he did not dare to accept Grim's challenge. Grim chuckled coldly. "The same goes for the rest of you. Anyone who wants to avenge Toriel can have a fair fight with me. As long as I am satisfied with the wager, I will definitely accept it. So, which one of you is willing to have a fair fight with me?" Towards the end, Grim's tone had become harsh. His eyes shone brightly as he glared at the group of people in front of him. Even Kevin, who was closest to him, was secretly shocked by the aura contained in his eyes. They were the ones who had come to capture this brat who had offended the dignity of the Wharton family. However, seeing the ferocious aura radiating from Grim, these people who had been making a ruckus just a moment ago all became silent. Some even turned their heads to avoid Grim's gaze. For a moment, more than 10 high-level apprentices and quasi-wizards were forced into a corner by Grim, who was only an intermediate wizard. Although they knew that they would definitely be punished by their families after being humiliated like this, none of them were willing to go against this crazy fellow who was currently in the limelight. Now that they had lost face, there was always room for negotiation when they returned. However, if they were to accept the bet out of impulse, it would not just be a matter of losing face. It was very likely that they would destroy the reputation that they had worked so hard to build in the training camp over the past 7 or 8 years. They would become a laughingstock. If it was someone else, they would not be so cowardly. However, this brat in front of them was too strange. He could even defeat Toriel, who was about to undergo the advancement ceremony, and it was said that he had done it in a fair one-on-one fight. The moment Toriel was injured and fell to the ground, the official wizard of the Wharton family stationed in the dark crypt was there. However, it was not convenient for him to personally take down this brat. If this Grim dared to offend the dignity of a magus, even if a magus personally killed him, no one would dare to stop him. However, the problem was that this brat had actually knocked Toriel unconscious in a fair fight. If a magus were to take action at that time, the other families would definitely laugh at them for not having a suitable successor. They had to personally deal with such a small matter as an intermediate wizard apprentice. Hence, after much consideration, this group of people had come together to denounce Grim and capture him for offending the family. However, Grim was now a member of the Byron family. It was impossible for them to beat him up indiscriminately. However, none of them had the confidence to take down Grim one-on-one. Grievance. Extreme grievance. Resentment. Indescribable resentment. The faces of more than 10 elite apprentices from the Wharton family turned ashen. It was as if thousands of ants had crawled into their bodies, making them look extremely embarrassed. "Let's go. We'll settle this with him later." Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, Hamel angrily waved his hand and led the group of people away. Seeing the group of aggressive elite apprentices leave in such a sorry state, the remaining members of the Byron family could not help but look at each other in dismay. They were all veterans of the training camp. Although the relationship between the two families was not too harmonious due to the competition, they were still familiar with each other. If they were in Grim's shoes, their performance would not have been any better. It was not that they were incompetent, but that this brat was too strange. Kevin had seen a lot of big scenes, so he pushed Grim away from the scene. Brother, since you're one of us, I won't treat you as an outsider in the future. Don't worry, with Dagon here, as long as you show the Byron family crest, no one will dare to make things difficult for you. Just tell me, and I'll bring people to destroy them." Grimm's face was immediately filled with smiles, and he expressed his gratitude again and again. Kevin's words were not boasting, but the truth. According to the records of the Magus families, there were more than 20 famous Magus families in the Dagon region. Amongst them, the Byron family, where Kevin was from, was at least in the top 3. As for the small human kingdom that the Byron family and the Mises family supported, they occupied a large piece of fertile land in the middle of the Dagon region. Hence, when Leyland said that he would protect him in the Dagon region, he was not lying at all. This situation was more or less the same in the Dagon region, even in the scattered Tower Forest. In this world where magi were revered, human nobles and even royal families were just tools and servants for the Magus families to manage the commoners. If they angered a Magus family that supported them, even the king of a human kingdom would have to abdicate or die of illness at any moment. With Kevin's status as Magus Angus's nephew, he would receive the most luxurious reception and service when he went to the human kingdom. As long as he was willing to nod, even if he had to ask the princesses to accompany him, the king would personally send them to their bedside with a smile. Chapter 100. The Dark Crypt had always been a place of trouble. Although no one deliberately spread the news, by the next morning, almost the entire Magus Tower was shocked by a terrifying piece of news that spread like a plague. A newly promoted intermediate sorcerer apprentice had defeated Toriel, the Wharton family's most promising candidate to become an official sorcerer in a fair one-on-one battle. As soon as this news came out, countless sorcerer apprentices scoffed at it. In the sorcerer world, even within the same rank, there was only a difference of 1 or 2 ranks. The difference in strength was so huge that it left people speechless. Some busybodies had once calculated that a prospective sorcerer could easily withstand the attacks of 2 or 3 high-level sorcerers in a normal battle, and could also withstand the attacks of 2 or more intermediate sorcerers. Therefore, when they first heard this news, most people only thought it was a cheap lie by the Wharton family's enemies to smear their name. But as this rumor became more and more intense, many people who were close to the elite sorcerers swore that it was all true. Hence, the entire Gloom Crypt Magus Tower's acolyte circle exploded in an instant. Countless junior and high-level sorcerers spread the news, searching everywhere for the real version of the rumor. Soon, all the information gathered pointed to an unfamiliar name, Grimm. Thus, more information related to Grimm was dug out. For example, when Grimm first came to the Dark Crypt, he was still a junior sorcerer. For example, when he first entered the underground world, he killed the terrifying Devil's Vine Lady and obtained the head of a fallen sorcerer. For example, when he was invited to join the training camp, he defeated 2 high-level elite sorcerers in a row. When this series of results was pieced together, all the sorcerers who heard it were inexplicably shocked. How was this possible? Everyone was very familiar with the strength of apprentices who had just entered the ranks of intermediate sorcerers. At this stage, their strength was the most awkward, usually only having 2 or 3 offensive spells. The more powerful ones would be able to grasp a defensive spell in advance, but ordinary intermediate acolytes would need a long time to grasp their first defensive spell in their life. With this kind of strength, it was like the difference between a 5 or 6-year-old toddler and a youth who was about to reach adulthood when compared to a high-level apprentice or a quasi-sorcerer who was about to reach the peak of apprentice. Oftentimes, such a difference in strength could no longer be made up for with skills and experience. However, they soon found out that this incredible Grimm was most likely a talented puppet master who could control many powerful voodoo puppets above his level. As soon as this news came out, the few rare puppeteers in the apprentice circle immediately felt honored. Even the way they talked and walked was much more energetic than before. Little did they know that while they were talking about the puppet master, Grim had already brought Mary and KB into the depths of the dark crypt, following the route they had explored last time towards the ruins of the Wizard Tower. To be honest, although Grim had a lot of plans and schemes for this treasure hunt, his opponent was a Magus rank magical creature. It was hard to tell if his plans and schemes would work. Riding on the demon crocodile hunter, the three of them gathered together and repeatedly checked the mission given to them. In order to get past the demon flower spirit, not only was Grim under a lot of pressure, but he had also given Mary and KB an extremely important mission. Grim was the main force in the battle, and his existence was to attract the attention of others. Only by luring the terrifying flower spirit away from the entrance of the ruins would Mary and KB have a chance to sneak in and find the body of the flower spirit. Only by cutting off the spiritual connection between the flower spirit and the body could Grim have a chance to defeat it. Otherwise, even if Grim sacrificed all of his magic puppets, he would not be able to win against a complete version of the flower spirit. Perhaps it was because the previous lesson was too painful, the gnolls outside the ruins had all disappeared. This surprised Grim, who had planned to eliminate the periphery first. When the demon crocodile hunter once again arrived in front of the demonized forest, Mary and the green-skinned goblin KB were so surprised that they could not close their mouth. The same scene might not be rare on the surface of the earth, but how could the two of them, who were already used to the desolation and loneliness of the underground world, not be astonished to see such a large, lush forest almost 20 miles below the surface of the earth? Go. Remember your mission. Once the flower spirit leaves, you must move fast. I can't hold it for long. Grim could not help but remind them before they parted. Mary's pretty face revealed a sweet smile. Her slender figure leapt into the air and instantly turned into a palm-sized red bat, flapping into the forest. Grim had nothing to worry about when it came to Mary. Whether it was her strength as a high-grade vampire or her newly acquired charm talent, they were the biggest guarantee for her survival, especially the latter. In this chaotic demonized forest, as long as she did not take the initiative to attack the enemy, ordinary magical creatures and plants would not take the initiative to attack her. This charm talent could transcend race, gender, faction, and other factors, and directly affect the subconscious of intelligent beings. It was said to be the best talent for treasure hunting in the wild. It was said that the advancement of many special professions required the talent of charm as a foundation. At this moment, KB was covered in tattered leather armor, an old cloak on his back that complemented his figure. He held the short wooden stick that had always accompanied him. "Master, don't worry. I'll do my best to complete the mission." KB bowed respectfully and jumped off the demon crocodile. He moved his two short legs and quickly disappeared into the depths of the forest. Although the demonized forest was dangerous, for a small goblin who had mastered invisibility and camouflage, the low-grade magical creatures were not enough to threaten his life. Besides, with Mary looking after him in the dark, even if the magical creatures discovered him, they would only be lucky and lose their lives. Once his two companions disappeared, Grim put away the demon crocodile hunter and released the 2 points of spiritual force that had been used. He needed the strongest combat power for the next battle, so every bit of spiritual force was precious and could not be wasted. After adjusting his spiritual force, Grim did not hesitate to summon a lightning giant and a rock python. Maintaining the existence of the lightning giant required 7 points of spiritual force, and maintaining a rock python required 3 points of spiritual force. Grim now had 25 points of spiritual force, including the noble headband plus 1 point of spiritual force, which was enough for him to summon another rock python or waterman. This was already the strongest combat combination that Grim could achieve after pushing himself to the limit. However, considering that the environment here could not display the strongest combat power of the new waterman, Grim was more inclined to the former. As soon as the lightning giant appeared, The vast underground space was filled with the rumbling of thunder. Surrounded by crackling lightning storms, the lightning giant opened its bright eyes and floated more than 10 meters in the air. It took the lead and rushed into the demonized forest. Grim gritted his teeth, tidied up his equipment, and followed behind the lightning giant without looking back. The huge rock python dragged its heavy body and slowly swam behind Grim, guarding against any possible attacks from behind. One man and two beasts slowly walked in the demonized forest. Grim didn't even need to bother clearing the bushes and vines along the way. When the lightning giant's huge body floated over, all the plants that got too close to it would be turned into ashes by the sudden thunderstorm. Even the small animals hiding in the dense forest were no exception. As long as the lightning giant sensed any life force, it would strike down with lightning. With the lightning giant's strength at the peak of the quasi-wizard level, even those strong iron armor rhinoceroses could not withstand its lightning, not to mention these small magical creatures that were only known for their strange abilities and stealth abilities. The lightning giant crushed everything in its way. Everywhere it passed, everything in the world turned into ashes. Even the ground was full of cracks caused by the lightning strikes. Although the magical creatures wanted to protect the source of their power, when the largest group of wolves were destroyed in front of the lightning giant, they finally knew fear and began to run away from the messenger of hell that could bring them death. In front of the ruins of the wizard tower that Grim had arrived at last, the hazy and beautiful figure of Hua Ling slowly emerged. She gazed at the rolling dark clouds that gathered above the forest in the distance. From time to time, dazzling lightning would strike down, followed by the continuous rumbling of thunder. Although she could not see the number of enemies yet, the power of the summoned lightning clouds made Hua Ling frown. She could not make a decision. Looking at the direction the lightning clouds were moving, they were heading straight for this place. If these outsiders were allowed to spread the flames of war here, it would probably cause immeasurable damage to the underground source of life. Therefore, a determined look appeared on Hua Ling's beautiful face. She grabbed at the air, and the magic bow that had accompanied her since she was born appeared in her hand. Following Hua Ling's murmur, the magical plants around the ruins began to grow and spread wildly. Soon, the lush plants covered the hidden entrance of the ruins. Chapter 101. With the flower spirit's agility, it managed to intercept Grim's group in the middle of the magical forest. "It's you again, you reckless bastard. Don't even think about leaving this place alive." Seeing Grim's familiar face, the flower spirit's angry eyes burned with a foot-long spiritual flame. Grim's mind was shaken by the spiritual pressure from 100 meters away, making it hard for him to keep his thoughts steady. "Damn it, I can't deal with a wizard-level monster with my current strength." Grim kept retreating until the rock python coiled its huge body around him and protected him. Only then did he calm down and regain his ability to think. "Lightning giant, stop it. Don't let it have a chance to attack me." Grim passed the order to the lightning giant through a hidden spiritual channel. In the next second, the lightning giant put its hands together, and a thick chain of lightning shot out, targeting the flower spirit in the air. It was clear that the flower spirit was 100 times more confident in its rosette armor. It did not fly away to avoid the attack. Instead, it forcefully withstood the violent elemental lightning and pounced towards the lightning giant that was guiding it. Rose branches sprouted from the flower spirit's body and automatically twisted together to form a set of exquisite and perfect flower armor, protecting its body within. Withstanding the sparks that shot out in all directions, it viciously stabbed one of its hands into the middle of the other party's chest. The flower spirit's battle instincts were very strong, and it could clearly see the strengths and weaknesses of the lightning giant. Fighting against an elemental puppet like this, slowly wearing it down was not the best way. Although it would save it a lot of damage, it would drag the battle into a battle of attrition that was difficult to predict and control. Therefore, it had to kill the lightning giant as fast as possible, even if it had to sacrifice some of its defensive power. This was the best way to prevent the enemy from controlling the rhythm of the battle. The lightning giant was neither surprised nor delighted by the enemy's sudden advance. Thunder rumbled within its body, and the chain of lightning that shot out from its palms immediately became a bit thicker. Just as Hua Ling was about to stab her slender claws into the lightning giant's chest, the lightning giant disappeared on the spot amid a flash of lightning. Lightning leap. Although it was said to be a jump, the actual effect was not much different from a short-distance teleportation. A series of crackling sounds came from 100 meters away, and the lightning giant appeared there, surrounded by lightning. There was no hesitation or thought at all. The moment he appeared, a new lightning chain traversed 100 meters and struck Hua Ling's delicate body once again. It had to be said that among all the elemental spells, the lightning spell was the fastest. It had almost reached the point where it could be executed at will. In order to dodge this level of attack, perhaps only those who had agility close to 20 points or above could do it. Grimm's face lit up. But before the smile could fully bloom on his face, he couldn't help but reveal a bitter expression. That's right, the lightning giant's strength alone was enough to deal with this terrifying flower spirit. However, it was precisely because the lightning giant was too powerful that its master, Grimm, was weak. When the terrifying flower spirit was unable to gain any advantage over the lightning giant, it would probably turn its attention to while Grimm was deep in thought. Hua Ling, who had exchanged a few blows with the lightning giant, stopped pouncing on Grimm. She slowly turned to look at Grimm. Damn it, damn it, damn it! Without saying a word, Grimm turned around and ran into the distance with the rock python. When the thunderclouds in the sky above the magical jungle rumbled and lightning boomed in the cave, a strong wave of earth elemental energy suddenly spewed out from the ground near the entrance of the cave. It quickly condensed into a circular spell formation with a diameter of 3 meters. A huge cloud of gray smoke surged out, and soon, 5 hazy and strange human figures condensed in the spell formation. With a muffled sound, the pale yellow earth element ring suddenly exploded, and the dust that filled the air suddenly exploded, revealing 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers who had crossed through space. Langdon, Felix, Hegel, and 2 other unknown fallen quasi-sorcerers. The bodies of the 5 trembled, but they quickly used their powerful mental strength to dispel the earth element that had infected their bodies and stabilized their minds. Although teleportation was much faster than running step by step, there would be a long period of dizziness after every teleportation. Therefore, it was not suitable for quick ambushes, and could only be used as a support method for long-distance teleportation. When the few of them got rid of the dizziness of teleportation, they began to look at the forest not far away, and were immediately attracted by the deafening thunder. It was obvious that the place had become a terrifying battlefield of slaughter. Langdon's tall body looked at the rolling thunderclouds in the distance, watching the 2 blurry figures moving quickly under the thunderclouds. He felt an inexplicable sense of joy in his heart. Damn brat! Let's see where you can run now. No matter how many people you brought this time, they will all die obediently in this enchanted jungle. Let's go. It's time for us to show up. With a ferocious smile, Langdon led the way into the jungle. Behind him, the other 4 fallen quasi-sorcerers looked at each other and stepped forward without saying a word. When the thunder rumbled in the distance, a red bat flapped its wings and rushed near the entrance of the ruins. Sensing the life force in the red bat's body, a vine suddenly emerged from the crisscrossing vines that covered the ruins and quickly swept towards the bat that was flying low in the sky. Mary shouted, and her body instantly changed back to her human form. A pair of sharp claws danced in the air, and in the blink of an eye, the tentacles of the demonic vine were cut into countless pieces. This was like poking a hornet's nest. In the next second, countless vines rose into the sky from the huge green field, forming a forest of green spears that stabbed towards Mary in a frenzy. Mary also had a ferocious look on her face. Her body turned into a red bolt of lightning and rushed wildly into the center of the forest of green spears. Her sharp claws swung out continuously, and every swing was accompanied by the breaking of a thick vine, causing a viscous green juice to gush out. Just as Mary was fighting with the forest of vines, a strange demonic vine stretched out from under the huge green leaf and pointed its end at Mary. The end of the demonic vine opened like a flower petal, revealing a strange eyeball that stared at Mary. No matter how hard she tried to dodge, she could not get rid of it. Almost at the same time as the eyeball of the demonic vine, the scene of Mary trying her best to slaughter the demonic vine appeared in the mind of the flower spirit in the distance. This caused its movements to involuntarily slow down. This kind of slowness was difficult for others to capture, but in the eyes of the lightning giant, it was clear and distinct. Therefore, a lightning spear with a crackling sound landed on the flower spirit's armor in the blink of an eye. The sudden explosion of a small lightning storm engulfed the flower spirit, and also tested the magic resistance of the rosette armor. So far, although the lightning giant had been fighting with the flower spirit for such a long time, it still could not break through the defense of the rosette armor. The creeping vines seemed to be endless, and when one was burned, another would grow, and when one was killed, another would grow. Although the lightning giant had tried its best, it still did not cause any substantial damage to the flower spirit. At most, it could only wear off some of the defense of the magic tool. The new enemy in the distance undoubtedly affected the flower spirit, making it scream angrily and want to leave the battlefield. Therefore, the lightning giant, who had been using guerrilla tactics, immediately rushed up and began to entangle the flower spirit's swift and fierce arrow attack. Meanwhile, at the ruins, after Mary's reckless and wild attacks, the ground was covered with countless twisted and struggling demonic vine limbs. When the demonic vines were cut to a certain extent, a hidden pitch-black entrance was revealed. Just as the forest of demonic vines and Mary were entangled with each other with all her might, a gray stone that nobody noticed was slowly approaching the entrance. Carefully avoiding the rattan branches that were rolling all over the ground and trying his best not to let the green juice stain his body, KB constantly scanned the surroundings for hidden dangers through the gaps of his cloak. Then, step by step, he slowly approached the entrance of the ruins. Obviously, Mary understood what he was doing, and was trying her best to lead the attacks of the demonic vines to the side. That was why the cautious green-skinned goblin, Cabby, could use the camouflage spell to directly enter the enemy's heart. Finally, after trekking over mountains and rivers, Cabby arrived at the entrance. After hesitating for a while, Cabby touched the magic collar around his neck, sensing the magic contract that was taking effect in his body. He finally made up his mind to complete the mission his master assigned him. He had no choice. Before coming here, to be safe, Grimm had specially paid a visit to Wizard Angus, and bought a magic servant contract from him. Now that the contract was in effect, the young man would be able to sense it the moment he had the slightest intention of betraying his master. At that time, he only needed to activate a secret spell, and the magic collar around Cabby's neck would instantly destroy his head. Therefore, if Cabby wanted to live, he could only follow his master's instructions and complete his mission. Abandoning the fantasies in his mind, Cabby gently removed the camouflage spell on his body, and waved his short wooden stick to cast an invisibility spell on himself. Only then did he rush into the cave. Chapter 102. In just a few minutes, the lightning giant had suffered an unprecedented ordeal. Although it was strong enough to defeat a powerful quasi-wizard, its weakness was just as obvious as its strength. That was, their overall defense was on the weak side. The wind vortex outside its body could deflect the enemy's attack with strong airflow, and the lightning shield and golden armor could also effectively weaken the enemy's attack. With these three layers of protection, the lightning giant could attack the enemy boldly and then flash away before the enemy's attack could reach it. With the lightning giant's lightning leap, there were not many enemies that could catch up with it. However, once Grimm ordered it to block the enemy, especially the flower spirit, whose overall strength was higher than it, the consequences of its weak defense and lack of solid body showed up one after another. In the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, the magic protection outside its body had been broken 7 times, and its tall and mighty cloud-like body had been torn to pieces by the flower spirit. If Grimm had not sent the rock python to help, the lightning giant would have been forced to give up part of its body to protect the 2 most important crystal cores in its body. However, the Demoness flower spirit was a wizard-level magical creature after all. Every single one of its spells or physical attacks could cause indescribable damage to the rock python or the lightning giant. Although the body of the rock python was wrapped in a thick and dense layer of underground sedimentary rock, even if it encountered a quasi-magus, as long as the opponent didn't continuously attack the same part of the rock python's body, the rock python's body wouldn't be broken. However, when it encountered a wizard-level flower spirit, the rock python's body that had not been tempered and protected by witchcraft was too weak. Under the attack of the green arrow rain, the rock python's body was corroded and full of holes, as if it had been soaked in a high concentration of strong acid. Many parts of the snake's body began to collapse because of the lack of earth elemental energy. The snake's body had thinned by more than 3 times. Since the attack of the arrow rain had exceeded the rock python's ability to repair itself, it was only a matter of time before the rock python collapsed. However, in this battle, the rock python was not the main fighting force. It was only responsible for supporting and coordinating the lightning giant's attack and defense. Therefore, it could not withstand the aftermath of the battle between the 2 powerful beings. From this, one could imagine the heavy pressure the lightning giant was facing right now. His originally solid green body was now riddled with holes. Wind elements in the form of clouds and mist were torn everywhere. These wind elements were originally a part of the lightning giant's body, but they had been dyed green by the flower spirit's strange energy. They could no longer be recycled. The golden armor was already in tatters, and strands of lightning energy were constantly dissipating into the air. This showed that the lightning giant's ability to restrain its own energy had been weakened to the lowest level. However, the beautiful flower spirit clearly had the advantage and initiative on the battlefield, but it seemed to be extremely violent and restless. Many times it had forced the rock python into a dead end. As long as it clenched its teeth and launched another round of fierce attacks, it would be able to penetrate the triangular head of the rock python and shatter the crystal core inside. However, it seemed to be in a hurry to attend an important appointment. It wanted to leave as soon as it had the chance, giving up such a great opportunity to kill the enemy. Therefore, relying on the alternating protection of the rock python and the lightning giant, the flower spirit retreated as it fought. It spent 15 minutes but still could not get rid of the 2 super sticky candy. However, at this time, the 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers from Blissful City suddenly appeared at the edge of the battlefield. Their arrival was undoubtedly a huge shock to both sides. The flower spirit suddenly felt a sense of crisis. It felt that it would be very difficult to get rid of this group of people with its own power today. Grimm, who was hiding at the edge of the battlefield, knew that he had made a huge mistake in his plan. He was afraid that it would be difficult for him to escape today. The 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers who slowly stepped into the battlefield were indescribably shocked. When they sensed the earth-shattering battle taking place in the magical forest, they thought that Grimm had invited an entire surface team to besiege the wizard-level flower spirit. Who knew that when they arrived at the scene, it was actually Grimm's puppet team that was fighting the terrifying flower spirit alone. This discovery undoubtedly made them even more afraid of this strange kid, who was only at the intermediate level. They definitely could not let this guy grow up. Facing the aggressive 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers, Grimm stretched out his hand to recall the rock python and the lightning giant. He then turned around and began to run. The extremely miserable-looking rock python caught up to Grimm and swallowed him in one gulp. It then plunged into the ground and disappeared without a trace. The lightning giant also disappeared on the spot in a burst of dazzling lightning. The next moment it suddenly appeared at the end of their sight. However, before they could chase after it, there was another burst of thunder, and the lightning giant escaped again. Its whereabouts were unknown. Without the lightning giant's entanglement, the terrifying flower spirit had no time to deal with these newly appeared fellows. It flapped its wings and quickly ran back to the entrance of the ruins. When it returned, the entire magical vine forest was already in a mess. The scattered rattan branches and the smelly, sticky, green, rotten juice made the place look like the most tragic battlefield. And the culprit, Red Robe Mary, was nowhere to be seen. The flower spirit roared angrily, folded its wings, and plunged into the dark entrance. There was no path underground. When the Magus Tower activated the preset self-destruct spell formation, most of the spell facilities inside had already been turned into broken gravel under the series of explosions. Everything was buried in the bricks and gravel that were falling down. The face flower that was originally planted in the sorcerer's garden was lucky enough to survive. After sensing a huge amount of green plant energy coming from the depths of the ground, the face flower began its tireless digging journey. Relying on its strange desire for plant energy, it actually drilled through tens of meters of thick and dense rubble ruins and planted its body in a remaining damaged elemental pool of the wizard tower. It was because of its exclusive absorption of different types of energy that the face flower managed to surpass many thresholds that ordinary magic plants could not, becoming the first terrifying magic creature in the magical jungle. It was a pity that its strength advanced quickly, but its spiritual wisdom and witchcraft knowledge were lacking. This was actually the weakness of all wild magic creatures. Although they could become powerful existences on par with human sorcerers by plundering resources, they often lacked the inheritance of magic, which made it difficult for them to fight against human sorcerers of the same rank. Once they were exposed, they would often become the targets of human sorcerers. Where did the rare materials in the sorcerer world come from? They came from these wild magic creatures that were not recognized by human sorcerers. Of course, not all sorcerers of other races were not recognized by humans. According to Grimm's knowledge, in the sorcerer world, the number and quality of sea tribe sorcerers was not inferior to that of human sorcerers. Apart from that, there were also some races with strange talents that were accepted by the sorcerer world, becoming a member of the sorcerer world. Take this terrifying flower spirit, for example. If a human sorcerer family was willing to accept it and impart some knowledge and traditions of the sorcerer world to it, it might be recognized by human sorcerers. Unfortunately, in this dark cave, it could only mingle with a group of low-level magic creatures that only knew how to kill and evolve. It was afraid of humans approaching and interacting with it. It was precisely because of its fear that the demonized forest displayed extreme hostility towards outsiders. The underground races that lived near the magical jungle would come here from time to collect materials that interested sorcerers, which further intensified the hostility and conflict. In the eyes of humans, the magical jungle was a magical treasure trove that contained many magic materials. In the eyes of the flower spirit and the jungle monsters, humans and the underground races were fresh delicacies for them to feast on. Under these hostile gazes, any foreign species that entered the magical jungle would cause a violent backlash from the jungle monsters. Flying down the dark and narrow tunnel, the bottom of the Hua Ling's heart was filled with rage and irritation. It wanted to charge out and kill everyone who dared to enter its territory. But before that, it had to ensure the safety of the source of its power. The dark and deep tunnel was dug by itself. It was twisted and turned, and the size was only enough for its slim body to pass through. There were many twists and turns along the way, and most of them led to some sinister traps or side road. There was only one way that led to its nest. Although most of the upper levels of the Sorcerer Tower had collapsed, some of the magic facilities on the first and second levels were still preserved. After coming out of the dark tunnel, There was a broken corridor that belonged to the original underground level of the Sorcerer Tower. Most of the stone rooms and magic rooms on both sides of the corridor had been forcefully broken through. Looking through the collapsed stone door, there was nothing inside. This was the storage of the original Sorcerer Tower, and there used to be a lot of standing resources inside. However, they had all been broken through by the flower spirit over the years, and everything inside had been taken away. The flower spirit did not stop here at all. It hurriedly rushed through the corridor, followed the spiral stone stairs at the end of the path, and quickly rushed into the second underground level where its main body was. Chapter 103. As the energy room of the Magus Tower, the second underground floor was a vast and boundless space. The collapse of the upper floors had brought unimaginable damage to the lowest floors. 4 of the 5 elemental pools had already been destroyed by the most violent self-destruction. The only remaining elemental pool had obviously been affected as well. The magical elements that were supposed to be balanced had deviated, and most of them were actually plant elemental particles. Every elemental pool was a huge pool, and the edges of the pool walls were etched with all sorts of magic runes and lines. The energy-gathering spell formation at the bottom of the pool was constantly absorbing magical elements from the nearby void and pouring them into the pool. The other 4 elemental pools had already collapsed, and the rubble that had fallen from the ceiling had filled the pools to the brim. The remaining spell formation no longer emitted any fluorescence from the operation of magical energy. Although the remaining elemental pool was still operating, a huge crack could be seen on the walls of the pool. Elemental water was flowing out of the crack, continuously dispersing into the surrounding air. The dispersing magical energy was obviously plant elemental energy, which caused the entire second underground floor to be filled with an indescribable plant fragrance. In this remaining elemental pool, there was a huge ancient tree with thick roots and a trunk so thick that 5 people could encircle it. It used its intertwining roots to fill up every inch of space inside. At the top of the ancient tree was a huge greenhouse formed by a large cluster of pink petals. The soft and fragrant stamens of the flowers formed a warm and sweet bed, and the sweet and cloying fragrance of the flowers was intoxicating. Of course, this thing that looked like a tall ancient tree was not a tree. It was the original body of the terrifying flower spirit, the originally petite and delicate human-faced flower. It was only because it had continuously devoured large amounts of plant magic elements that it had grown uncontrollably into its current form. To be honest, even the most knowledgeable magus would not be able to differentiate its species from its current appearance. After all, a magical creature that could monopolize an elemental pool was one of a kind. The flower spirit only heaved a sigh of relief when it rushed in and saw that the huge main body that took up a fifth of the underground space was unharmed. However, when it communicated with the consciousness of its main body, it suddenly let out a shrill roar. Its voice was sharp and ear-piercing. It was as noisy and unpleasant as the voices of a man and a woman stacked together. "You damned bastard, get out here! What did you do to my real body?" As Hua Ling waved her slender hand, a large ball of green acid shot out. The target was an inconspicuous rock at the edge of the wall in the distance. Don't hit me, I'm out." Following a shrill cry of panic, Cabby's short green figure tumbling out from the stone void. The powerful acid arrow pierced through the rock camouflaged by the gray cloak and hit the hard wall. After a series of sizzling sounds of acid corrosion, a large area of the wall softened like hot wax and flowed down, revealing the rune lines etched inside the wall. Shocked by the power of the acid arrow, Cabby leaped up and down and brandished the short stick in his hand, threatening loudly, "Stop, or I'll detonate the alchemy bomb in the elemental pool." Alchemy bomb? Hua Ling stopped what she was doing and asked doubtfully. In her mind, everything that had happened in the past half a day quickly flowed from the main body into her brain. After this damned goblin barged into this place, He rummaged through various hidden places for a long time. Then, he climbed up to the elemental pool and threw many strange cylinders that resembled scrolls into the pool. He also stuffed many cylinders into various parts of the main body. Hua Ling spread out her slender and fair little hand, and the roots of the main body wrapped up a cylinder and delivered it to her hand. "What's this?" Hua Ling looked at it in confusion for a long time, but could not figure out the specific purpose of the cylinder. There were no magic patterns etched on it that could be analyzed, nor were there any elemental crystals that could be used as an energy source. What kind of harm could such a thing do? Just as Hua Ling was about to capture the goblin with a puzzled expression, little Cabby raised the short stick in his hand and yelled sharply, "Explode!" In the next moment, under Hua Ling's incredulous gaze, the cylinder in her hand exploded. A huge fireball instantly engulfed the upper half of Hua Ling's body. The violent shockwave sent the gravel and debris where she was standing flying, causing a small mushroom-shaped dust pillar to rise. When the smoke and fire gradually dispersed, Hua Ling's charred body was revealed. However, as a dark green halo swept across, Hua Ling's face became gentle and fair again. Not a single injury could be seen on her body. Hua Ling clenched her teeth and crushed the remaining half of the iron pipe in her hand. She was going to kill this bastard goblin who dared to mess with her. However, before she could move, Goblin Cabby's short stick suddenly pointed at the elemental pool. "Don't move. If you dare to move, I will immediately detonate the alchemy bomb there." Although Cabby's threat was simple, it made Hua Ling's expression change instantly. The explosion just now was not that powerful. It was like an ant trying to shake a tree and kill a powerful wizard. However, it was more than enough to destroy the elemental pool. The elemental pool was already broken to the point that it would fall with just a touch. Even though Hua Ling's body was growing inside, she had to be careful. She was afraid that she would break the pool wall and destroy the energy source that brought her the greatest hope. Just 1 or 2 alchemy bombs could cause irreversible damage to the elemental pool. That was equivalent to cutting off the possibility of Hua Ling becoming stronger. Therefore, Hua Ling screamed in horror, but she did not dare to move even half a step forward. "Don't destroy my home, okay?" Hua Ling begged in a low voice with tears in her eyes. "I'm willing to pay any price for this." At this moment, the flower spirit's delicate and sweet voice, coupled with her beautiful and ethereal appearance, was able to make all the male creatures in the world feel a sense of infatuation. Perhaps living with a Hua Ling like this was not a bad choice. From now on, she would no longer be a green-skinned goblin that others looked down on. She would be before Cabby could start his fantasy of a beautiful life. Grimm's cold snort sounded in his mind. Cabby shuddered. Only then did he remember the magic collar on his neck and the magic contract on his body. "Ugly woman, don't even think about seducing Master Cabby. If you don't listen to me, I will detonate all the alchemy bombs." After being warned by his master in disguise, Cabby flew into a rage out of humiliation and waved his fist at Hua Ling furiously. "Oh my God, the thing in front of me is a wizard-ranked magical flower spirit. Under normal circumstances, such a terrifying monster would be able to destroy him with a single finger, leaving not even a trace of him behind. But now, Hua Ling could only suck up to him. This kind of indescribable comfort was even better than having 10 goblin sisters giving him a massage. This kind of insignificant green-skinned goblin was usually given to Hua Ling as food, but Hua Ling disliked its sour and smelly flesh. But now, as soon as he had the power in his hands, he did as he pleased and actually shouted at it like this. Hua Ling's face turned red, then green, and finally as black as the bottom of a pot. However, it was a monster, so it didn't have the integrity and dignity that humans cared about. It immediately smiled and said, "Since you've taken the risk to barge into this place, you must be after the treasures buried in the ruins, right? You don't have to worry about it. I've already cleaned up that place. Some good treasures are all here." As the flower spirit smiled sweetly, The trunk of the gigantic human-faced flower that resembled an ancient tree trembled slightly. The fragrant bed in the flower's boudoir moved slightly to the left and right, revealing the piles of magical gems and magic materials inside. Damn it! No wonder all the treasure vaults and secret rooms were empty along the way. So it turns out that they were all moved here by this flower spirit. Once the goblin cabbie's eyes landed on the sparkling gems, gold coins, mithril, diamonds, and crystal essences, he couldn't shift his gaze away. In its heart, countless greedy cabbies were howling at the top of their lungs. Mine, mine, they're all mine. The deafening howl shook Cabbie's soul, causing him to be intoxicated. He didn't notice the glint that flashed past the bottom of Hua Ling's eyes. Go to hell, you damned goblin! Hua Ling's voice suddenly changed from a sweet girl's voice to a boorish male's as he roared angrily. Meanwhile, the instant the flower spirit's expression changed, countless thick and sturdy roots erupted from the rubble in front of and behind Cabbie, stabbing crazily at it from every angle. With such speed and suddenness, Cabbie was caught off guard and didn't even have the time to react. All he could do was watch as countless tentacles with metallic luster stabbed into his body. Sizzle, 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 countless sharp air-piercing sounds could be heard as the sharp roots and tentacles slashed at his body and face. He could feel the sharp pain as if he was being cut by a knife. Cabbie, who was prepared to close his eyes and wait for death, suddenly felt as if he was riding the clouds. He actually dashed left and right in the web of intersecting tentacles, dodging by a hair's breadth each time. Cabbie suddenly turned around, only then realizing that Mistress Mary's beautiful face was right beside him. She was grabbing onto his body and dashing left and right in the root forest, dodging with great difficulty. Idiot, hurry up and threaten it to stop. Seeing that the dumb goblin hadn't realized what was happening, Mary wanted to fling him into the root forest. Oh! Only then did Cabbie come to his senses, turning his face and pointing at the giant tree in the distance. With a loud boom, a cloud of fire erupted from the middle of the giant flower's trunk. A piece of skin the size of a washbasin was blasted open, viscous green liquid gushing out. Why aren't you stopping? If you don't, I'll explode continuously, Cabbie shrieked. Chapter 104. The atmosphere in the room suddenly froze. The flower spirit, whose body was injured, roared and cursed. The sharp and delicate female voice overlapped with the rough and bold male voice, and outsiders could not understand what it was shouting about. Finally, after venting the anger in its chest, the flower spirit, who had the appearance of a beautiful woman, flapped its transparent wings and hovered in the air of the second underground level. You damned outsiders, what are you trying to do by barging into my home? Tell me your intentions. Esteemed Lord, we are just some people who came to look for treasures. As long as we can obtain the treasures here, we have no intention of becoming enemies with you. After Mary chose a safe place to put it down, the goblin cabbie could not wait to start a negotiation. He might not be an expert in combat, but when it came to business negotiations, the goblin cabbie had an outstanding talent that did not match his identity and status. Mary couldn't care less about Cabbie's servility and flattery, nor did she bother to do it. That was why she simply left the negotiation to Cabbie, while she remained vigilant against any sudden attacks from the flower spirit. Any negotiation required a trump card. There was no need to negotiate when their strengths were not equal. If not for Mary's protection, the flower spirit would only need a quick sneak attack to completely erase this annoying goblin merchant from his body to his soul. Why would it hold back its anger and negotiate with the other party? In fact, there were not many materials, resources, and treasures that it had gathered from the Wizard Tower ruins that were suitable for it. The reason why the flower spirit collected them together was purely to admire and decorate the greenhouse. Even if it gave them all to the other party, it would not be too distressed. However, it could not get rid of the grievance of being robbed by a lowly being. Usually, it considered itself to be the lord of the magical forest. The countless demonic plants and creatures in the entire demonized forest all relied on it to live. Those that worshipped it well could occupy the area closer to the ruins, while those that were unruly could only sniff the thin demonic aura that was filtered by others. When it was in a good mood, it would leak out more elemental aura. And just this little bit of grace was enough to make the monsters in the forest overjoyed and move them to tears of gratitude. When it was in a bad mood, it could take over all the demonic chi, causing the monsters outside the ruins to scratch their heads and start killing each other. With such methods, it was undoubtedly the most powerful being in the entire demonized jungle. It was also the king that all monsters had to curry favor with. But today, as the king, he had to patiently bargain with a lowly green-skinned goblin, and they were actually discussing how much of his collection he had to give up in order to satisfy the bottomless greed of the other party. Just as the two sides were negotiating, the bottom of the ruins suddenly shook violently. Large pieces of stone slabs immediately fell from the already unstable walls, and the rustling of dust blinded everyone's eyes. Damn it, damn it! Hua Ling's anger was about to boil. There's still a bunch of bastards up there. It wanted to rush out and chase the group of outsiders away, but it was worried about the 2 ticking time bombs in its home, so it became increasingly restless. As a wild monster, it did not have enough witchcraft knowledge to repair the damaged elemental pools. Once the remaining elemental pools were damaged by the outsiders, it would be impossible for it to continue strengthening itself. Just as it was hesitating, another earth-shaking tremor came from above. This time, even the rock wall of the second underground layer exploded with a huge crack. "You damn bastards! I'll catch you when I get up there and torture you to death in the cruelest way possible." After roaring furiously, Hua Ling waved its hand, and the greenhouse of the giant tree wriggled. More than 10 vines that were as nimble as human fingers wrapped around a bunch of treasures and threw them in front of the 2 of them. "Take these things and leave this place immediately. If you dare to barge in again, I'll kill you even if I have to give up this nest. Leave the magic wand behind and leave quickly." Hua Ling lost its patience and started to chase them away. "You want us to hand over the magic wand now? Don't you want us to die here? Who knows if you'll keep your promise?" Goblin Cabbie's expression was completely dark now. Since it was a one-time deal, he did not care about what the Hua Ling thought of him. "Take these things and hand over the magic wand once we're out of this area. Hurry!" Hua Ling was so angry that her beautiful face was starting to contort. Goblin Cabbie was quite a talent. He searched his body with both hands, and instantly pulled out a huge cloth sack that was filled with patches. He swept all the resplendent magical gems, precious diamonds, magic materials, and oddly shaped magic tools into the sack. Cabbie carried the large cloth bag on his back with difficulty, and urged Mary to leave this place as soon as possible. Under Hua Ling's covetous gaze, Mary turned into a large vampire bat and grabbed Cabbie before flying out of the second level of the underground. Once they left, Hua Ling waved her slender hands, and magic vines and rose branches spread out in all directions, occupying the entire space in an instant. She flapped her wings and followed closely behind the 2 of them, flying towards the upper levels of the ruins. Every time they advanced a certain distance, Hua Ling would cast an incantation, using dense flower branches and vines to seal off the path to the lower levels. It no longer dared to look down on these weak, but nimble and cunning low-level creatures. When the 3 of them flew out of the ruins one after another, they were horrified to find that the demonized forest had already been turned into a ruined battlefield. It seemed like she did not intend to return to her nest before she chased away all the outsiders. Hua Ling lightly plucked the magic bow in her hand, and hundreds of emerald arrows of light shot out, instantly destroying the temporary path to the lower levels. "You can leave immediately after handing over the magic wand. I still have to settle the score with those bastards for destroying my territory." Hua Ling's pretty face was frosty, and her tone was icy cold. Cabbie and Mary looked at each other and communicated silently. In the end, Cabby carefully took out the magic wand and tossed it to Hua Ling. By the way, that intermediate acolyte who can control the lightning giant is my master. As long as you help us repel the attacks of those fallen acolytes, I promise I'll never step into your territory again. Hua Ling groaned and took the magic wand. She sensed that there was indeed some hidden magical connection between the wand and the underground. Only then did she put it back into her rose armor. Leave this place. If I see you again, you'll definitely regret it. After saying that, Hua Ling suddenly turned into a ray of green light, and rushed towards the battlefield not far away. At this moment, Grimm was constantly experiencing the feeling of despair. Grimm had a deep understanding of what it was like to be attacked by 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers. Both of the lightning giant's legs had disappeared, and even the 2 energy-gathering cores that contained wind energy had been destroyed. The scattered and disorderly wind elements gathered around the giant's legs, barely maintaining the form of a wind vortex. The golden armor on the tattered torso was shattered, revealing the mist-like wind elemental core within the green body. The lightning giant, whose combat power had been greatly reduced, did not dare to block the attacks of the 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers. It kept flashing in the sky, dodging the continuous attacks of witchcraft. It was still in a good condition. The rock python that Grimm was hiding in was dragging half of its body and continuously digging into the ground. However, it would soon be forced out of the ground by that hateful Felix. Every time it appeared on the ground, the 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers would attack it. The violent tremors that Hua Ling felt underground were the result of the attacks of the 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers. Just like the rock python, the most innocent demonized forest was also in shambles. The fallen quasi-sorcerer Langdon was obviously a bloodline acolyte, and the magic bloodline he chose was the frost giant. When he unreservedly revealed his magic transformation, Grimm could clearly feel the surging power of frost in his majestic body. The transformed frost giant was more than 4 meters tall. It had light blue skin, and its muscular body was covered in icicles and frost armor. Every movement it made was accompanied by a bone-chilling cold wind. His large-scale blizzard and ice spear projectiles also caused great damage to the land. After each spell, the ground was covered with broken ancient trees and monsters sealed in transparent ice crystals. The other fallen quasi-sorcerers obviously did not go all out like Langdon, but even so, the powerful elemental witchcraft still caused great damage to the rock python that Grimm was hiding in. However, the biggest threat to Grimm was still Felix. Now, Grimm was sure that the mysterious guy who forced him out of the Earth space last time was Felix. Although this quasi-sorcerer Earth master rarely attacked Grimm directly, he could use his proficient Earth ability to cut off the deep connection between the rock python and the Earth element. Therefore, before long, the rock python would be forced out of the ground by the pressure of the Earth element. If the Earth element was like an ocean in front of the rock python before, it was now solidified, and the rock python could no longer move freely. The broken half of the rock python's body was bound by the lightning chain of the thunder quasi-sorcerer Hegel, and then it was broken by the 5 quasi-sorcerers. If Grimm did not summon another rock python in time to attract their firepower, he would have died under the siege of the 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers. However, just when he was in extreme pain, Mary's message through the witchcraft imprint made him feel relieved. Chapter 105. When the furious flower spirit arrived on the battlefield, the 5 fallen apprentices were bombarding the rock python that had just emerged from the ground. Ice blades and snow swords covered a large area, endless lightning chains, lava volcanoes that shook the sky, and shadow arrows that covered the sky. Although the berserk sorcery had caused great damage to Grimm's rock python, it had also destroyed the entire demonized forest. At a glance, 1/3 of the magical forest had been flattened by the violent spells. The flower spirit hovered in the air above the forest, looking at the scene of devastation. She could no longer suppress the anger in her heart. Because of Mary's warning, Grim would rather be beaten up by the enemies than fight back recklessly. Even the lightning giant that was flickering in the sky had stopped using its large area of effect spells and switched to single-target lightning attacks to barely deal with the enemy's attack. Therefore, when the flower spirit arrived at the scene, the first thing she saw was the 5 fallen quasi-sorcerers unscrupulously attacking with their full power, turning the entire forest upside down. With a shout, the flower spirit's figure was as fast as lightning. She was the first to attack Felix, who was at the back of the team. In the previous battle, the others were responsible for attacking, while Felix was purely responsible for forcing Grim out of the ground. Therefore, in comparison, his position was a bit far behind and he bumped into the terrifying Hua Ling who was about to attack. Just from this attack, one could tell how terrifying a wizard-level monster was when it went all out. The magic bow in her hand was instantly pulled to its limit. Powerful plant magic energy quickly gathered at the tip of the flower spirit's finger, condensing into a bright green arrow. When Felix turned around in shock, the bowstring moved, and the arrow shot out like lightning, piercing into his chest in an instant. The quickly condensed petrified armor was broken the moment it came into contact with the arrow. If Felix had not tried his best to move to the side, the arrow would have pierced through his heart. Even so, the terrifying arrow that pierced through his right shoulder had taken away half of his body. The right half of his body was corroded by the sudden explosion of green energy. His flesh was corroded, his bones destroyed, and most of his internal organs were exposed, sizzling as they were corroded by the strange energy. In just a single exchange, Felix, who had been ambushed, was severely injured and on the verge of death. The remaining 4 people turned around in anger. But at this moment, Hua Ling's terrifying rain of arrows was already upon them. The attack was so strong that the 4 of them were forced into a defensive position. First, he was beaten half to death by Hua Ling's ferocious attack. Then, he was bombarded by the terrifying rain of arrows. Felix, who was already injured, did not dare to be careless. He quickly self-destructed the wizard's staff in his hand, creating a huge cloud of yellow smoke. After the cloud of smoke quickly dispersed under the attack of the rain of arrows, his figure could no longer be seen in the field. The remaining 4 fallen quasi-sorcerers did not dare to be careless. They instantly unleashed their own special techniques and threw their fiercest witchcraft at Hua Ling's body. Ice Crystal Explosion, Lightning Prison, Shadow Assault, Flame Blast. The 4 quasi-wizard spells with their own characteristics were already the strongest single-target spells of the 4 of them. It was not that they did not have other large-scale spells, but these single-target spells were the most effective against a speed-type magic creature like Hua Ling. It had to be said that a wild magic creature like Hua Ling only had the physical attributes of a magus, but did not have the abilities of a magus. Although human magi were weaker than magic creatures in terms of physical attributes, they could rely on thousands of years of magic inheritance and the accumulation of knowledge. Even though they were weak, they could unleash terrifying spells that were many times stronger than their own abilities. Therefore, although the fallen quasi-sorcerers were a rank lower than Hua Ling, their offensive spells were not weak. The 4 violent spells that represented their strongest battle power were wreaking havoc on Hua Ling's body. The green light on the rose armor that had been shot out continuously flashed. The growing rose branches were destroyed by the spells, but they still persistently protected Hua Ling's body. At the corners, the violent spells broke through the defense of the flower armor, and the devastating elemental explosion was used on Hua Ling's body. For the first time since the start of the battle, blood flowed from the corner of Hua Ling's mouth. The berserk Hua Ling flapped its wings and quickly took it out of the area of focus fire. The rain of arrows in its hands became more and more ferocious, trying to break through the defense of the 4 people with a saturated attack. Langdon, who had completed his bloodline transformation, roared loudly. His indigo-blue face showed a look of anger. Ice crystal spears quickly condensed in his hands, and then he quickly threw them at Hua Ling, who was constantly dodging. The frost giant bloodline gave him the ability to cast ice witchcraft limitlessly, and also greatly strengthened every ice witchcraft he activated. Although the ice spears that exploded around the flower spirit did not hit it, the ice power that spread out invaded its body, causing a thick layer of ice crystals to form on its flower armor. Its speed of evading and flying was greatly slowed down. The other three quasi-sorcerers saw an opportunity and immediately stepped up their attacks. Witchcraft that was as dense as rain cut through the sky, constantly attacking Hua Ling, killing a middle-level surface boy, was a good harvest for them. However, if they could kill a wild wizard-level monster leader, then just dividing the wizard-level magic materials was enough to make the four of them laugh for the whole day. However, when the two sides were in a stalemate, Grimm, who had hidden in the distance for a simple rest, came back again. His target was, of course, the group of fallen quasi-sorcerers who had chased after him. High in the air, he silently guided 17 fingers, and the lightning giant's large thunderstorm once again enveloped the four fallen quasi-sorcerers. The suddenly rich lightning element in the air pushed out the elemental particles of other attribute. This made it difficult for the others to cast elemental spells, except for Hegel, who was good at lightning spells. The continuous lightning strikes also had a slight numbing effect, which could easily interrupt the witchcraft in their hands. Although they knew that they could easily be attacked by the enemy's area of effect spells if they gathered together, the four fallen quasi-sorcerers did not dare to go too far away from their companions in the face of a terrifying Hua Ling who moved like the wind. Otherwise, if they were attacked by the Hua Ling with no regard for their own injuries, none of them had the confidence to hold on until their companions came to their rescue. Other than Langdon, who had transformed into a frost giant, who had some close combat skills, the other three were pure elemental apprentices. Once the enemy got close to them, they would be helpless and their combat power would be greatly reduced. Seeing that they were about to be attacked from the front and back, Langdon, who led the team, shouted angrily, "Hegel, you go and deal with the kid's puppet. The three of us will hold this crazy woman." Hegel responded, turned around and forced the approaching lightning giant away with a lightning chain, then began to attack and defend with it. The Hua Ling, who was swimming quickly in the rain of bullets, relied on the strength of the rosette armor and the sharpness of the magic bow in her hand to continuously wear down the defense of the fallen quasi-sorcerers with guerrilla warfare. Under its continuous attacks, the quasi-sorcerers' defensive spells could not last more than 30 seconds. Every time the defensive spells were broken, the quasi-sorcerer would hide behind his companions and cast defensive spells on himself. However, the three quasi-sorcerers complemented each other and covered for each other. They were able to fight the Hua Ling well, and even added a few new wounds on its body. As a wild magical creature, the Hua Ling had almost no other means of attack except for a few limited witchcraft skills. If it wanted to quickly break through the enemy's defense, it could only take the risk to fight in close combat. However, that would also increase the number of attacks it would receive. It was far safer than guerrilla warfare now. Of course, it could also launch a full-power light arrow attack while enduring the enemy's attack. However, the 7-second concentration period was not practical in this race against time. Therefore, it could only rely on fast attacks and fast roaming to slowly wear down the enemies. However, opportunities would always appear inadvertently. When the fire element quasi-sorcerer's flame shield was broken by the Hua Ling again, he quickly hid behind the tall Langdon and loudly chanted the spell to summon the flame shield. Although the Hua Ling found an opening under Langdon's dense ice spear attacks and the sinister dark curse of the other quasi-sorcerer, it could only sit back and watch as he cast defensive spells on itself. However, just as the flame shield of the quasi-sorcerer was about to take shape, the ground under their feet suddenly shook violently. The originally solid rock layer suddenly bulged and cracked, and a huge python emerged from it. The expressions of the people present instantly changed. The violent changes in the terrain forced the quasi-sorcerers to constantly dodge and evade. This unknowingly broke through the defensive line that they were so close to. In this chaotic moment, everyone could only look after themselves. No one had the time to take care of their fragile companions. The other quasi-sorcerers were slightly better off. They had defensive spells to protect themselves. While attacking the enemy, they quickly dodged and escaped the attack range of the rock python safely. However, the fire element quasi-sorcerer's flame shield that was about to take shape was broken just like that. When he kept running, he did not have the chance to replenish himself. Just as he was trying his best to escape, he suddenly felt a strong wind behind him. The fire element quasi-sorcerer instantly realized that something was wrong. Without thinking about anything else, he opened his eyes wide and shouted with all his might. A temporary flame shield began to quickly condense behind him. Unfortunately, before the flame shield could take shape, a super-sharp slender hand pierced through the dense flames, grabbed his shoulder, and brought him into the air. "Damn it, it's that Hua Ling." Instantly realizing this, the fire element quasi-sorcerer's 4 or 5 magic tools lit up at the same time. A flame barrier enveloped his body and immediately turned his surroundings into a world of flames. The surging flames, the cheerful fire crows, the faintly discernible Hua Ling. For a moment, countless fire element creatures appeared in the barrier, igniting everything around them. Chapter 106. When the large intestines, small intestines, heart, liver, spleen, and lungs rained down from the sky, all the human apprentices could not help but feel a little dazed. A quasi-wizard. This time, it was a quasi-sorcerer that had been killed. All the fallen apprentices screamed in their hearts. Apart from anger, there was also a trace of unconcealable fear on their twisted faces. If they were the ones who had broken the defensive spell just now, then the corpse fragments that were raining down from the sky now would probably be them. Thinking of this, all the fallen apprentices felt an endless chill in their hearts. For the first time, they were in awe of a wizard-level magical creature. Without any hesitation, Hegel's body was wrapped in a layer of dazzling electric net, and he disappeared in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already far away at the edge of the magical forest. The dark quasi-wizard's body suddenly exploded into a large cloud of black smoke, which quickly sank into the soil under his feet. Then, he quickly escaped to the edge of the forest, leaving a slightly raised line in the soil. Langdon, who had transformed into a frost giant, instantly changed his expression. He took a step back, crouched on the ground, and put his hands together. A large ball of crystal-clear ice instantly sealed him inside. Looking at the thickness of the layer of ice and the shining runes in it, perhaps even Hua Ling's most powerful attack would not be able to break it in a short period of time. It couldn't be helped. The frost giant transformation gave Langdon a strong physique and unparalleled physical strength. It also gave him ice magic that was far beyond ordinary people. Unfortunately, all this had nothing to do with speed. If he was defeated and ran away, such a huge body would only attract more enemies. Therefore, Langdon could only temporarily protect himself with the ice fortress. Inside the transparent ice, Langdon's tall and strong body began to rapidly degenerate and once again returned to his normal form. Through the transparent ice crystal, he took out a magic scroll that was full of ancient patterns. He looked at Hua Ling and Grimm with his fiery eyes, and then he opened it helplessly. Following a dense flash of light, a violent spatial fluctuation reverberated on the battlefield. When the light dissipated, Langdon's figure could no longer be seen inside the ice. An escape scroll. This was not something that ordinary acolytes could buy with a large sum of money. Usually, only those at the rank of official magus could refine it. Most of them would escape to a safe and secluded location. Grimm did not attempt to break the ice barrier. Instead, he carefully commanded the lightning giant and the 2 shattered rock python manticores to gather around him and slowly retreated from the battlefield. The few fallen quasi-sorcerers who acted as buffers had all run away, leaving only Hua Ling and him. Based on how vengeful the monsters were, they probably wouldn't treat him as a comrade, so, unfortunately, a green light flashed in front of Grimm just as he was about 100 meters away. Hua Ling's battered body blocked his way. Grimm sighed silently. Although the flower spirit had the upper hand in the battle just now, heavily injuring one, killing another, and scaring off 3 quasi-sorcerers, it did not come without paying a price. Under the wear and tear of countless powerful spells, the rosette armor that covered its body had lost its luster. Even its delicate body was full of scars left behind by the spells. Although the ambush on the fire quasi-sorcerer was very short, the fire barrier that the flower spirit unleashed before its death had caused great damage to its body. However, Grimm could see that its short green hair had been burnt into a mess, and its sexy and beautiful body was covered with large and small blisters and burn marks. A large area of scorch marks had also appeared on the edges of the transparent wings on its back, causing its flight to become a little unstable, and its speed had also decreased by quite a bit. "What, you still want to leave after messing up my territory like this?" Hua Ling's beautiful face was filled with a sinister and twisted smile. "You better stay here and use your flesh and soul to make up for my loss." After saying that, Hua Ling was about to attack, but Grimm quickly stopped her. "Wait, Lady Hua Ling, we were fighting together just now, weren't we?" "Humph, you're all damned outsiders, all damned. They've already paid the price, and you need to pay the price too. Lord Hua Ling, please consider this carefully. You're also riddled with scars right now, and if you want to defeat me, I'm afraid the price you have to pay is not something you can bear right now. How about stop dreaming? Today, even if I have to pay a great price, I will tear you to pieces." Seeing Hua Ling's determined expression, Grimm's face revealed an expression that said, "You forced me to do this." He suddenly straightened his back and looked at Hua Ling, who was approaching him step by step. He shouted loudly, "Since you insist on fighting, then I can only accompany you. Explode! Explode!" His last sentence was obviously not directed at Hua Ling. Hua Ling suddenly had an ominous premonition when she heard the arrogant kid's sharp shout. Sure enough, as soon as Grimm's shrill voice sounded, a loud rumble came from the ground under their feet. Accompanied by the strong shaking of the ground where the ruins were located first bulged high, and then quickly collapsed. This repeated 3 times before the terrifying explosion shock wave was completely eliminated. This time, it was Hua Ling's turn to scream. This was because at that moment, the inseparable spiritual connection between it and its main body was suddenly cut off. It was not blocked, nor was it interfered with, but it was directly cut off. Without the support of energy from her main body, Hua Ling's soul aura started to weaken drastically. "You damned humans! What did you do? I'm going to kill you!" Hua Ling grabbed the short wooden stick, and it broke into pieces, instantly turning into ashes. The moment it turned into ashes, a dense cursed aura entered Hua Ling's body, causing its aura to become even weaker. Despite the continuous attacks, Hua Ling's soul level still did not fall below that of a wizard. This showed how much spiritual energy it had stored for itself after monopolizing an elemental pool. However, when its main body and elemental pool were blown into thousands of pieces by the alchemy bomb, Hua Ling's soul pressure suddenly disappeared. Seeing Mary flapping her wings and flying towards him from afar, Grimm waved his hand. The lightning giant and 2 rock pythons pounced forward with all their might. In an instant, the flames of battle that had just died down were ignited once again. This cruel and intense battle lasted for a whole 2 hours before it ended. In fact, the moment Hua Ling's main body was blown up, the result of the battle had already been decided. If Hua Ling was really a smart and cunning monster, it should have escaped the moment it lost contact with its main body. However, it was clear that the flower sprite had not learned the cunning and treacherous ways of humans. When it tried to perish together with Grimm, Mary found an opportunity to latch onto its body and bite its neck. Vampires' thirst for the blood of the strong was unimaginable, especially for high-grade vampires. If not for the lightning giant's lightning whip, perhaps Mary would have been killed by Hua Ling before it died. However, with the help of the lightning giant and the rock pythons, Mary did not care about anything and wrapped herself around Hua Ling's body, sucking its blood that contained plant energy crazily. Hua Ling defended against the attacks of the magic puppets while tearing Mary's body apart. Even though Mary's body was torn to pieces and blood splattered everywhere, Mary still did not care. She was completely crazily sucking the blood of Hua Ling without a care for her own life. The blood that Mary devoured also brought great benefits to her. Other than quickly repairing her broken body, Mary's mental wave became stronger and stronger, and her soul aura became stronger and stronger. On the other hand, Hua Ling's mental wave and soul aura continued to weaken, and in the end, it was even on the verge of death. At first, Mary's petite body was wrapped around Hua Ling's body, but in the end, Hua Ling's body became limp and only did not fall because of Mary's support. When the last wisp of soul aura disappeared from Hua Ling's body, Mary let go of her hands in satisfaction. Hua Ling's delicate and soft body was like a leaking balloon as she laid motionlessly on the ground. Mary let out a burp, and the abundant life energy made her pretty face turn red. She only had time to smile at Grimm, then fell beside Hua Ling and fell asleep. Damn, crazy women are really troublesome. Can't you wait until we return to the Magus Tower and everything is safe before you start enjoying yourself? After complaining endlessly, Grimm could only carry Mary with one hand and the corpse of Hua Ling in the other. He began to instruct the lightning giant to clean up the battlefield. The corpses of the fire quasi-sorcerer were scattered all over the ground. Perhaps they could find some useful treasures in his remains. Of course, Grimm was more interested in the magic notes that might be in Hua Ling's waist. While Grimm was busy, the bushes not far away parted, and Kobe came out with a large cloth bag on his back. Master, there are still some treasures underground. Grimm gritted his teeth and stomped his foot, saying fiercely, I'll let the rock python help you. Take as much as you can. You only have half an hour. A rock python quickly slithered over and opened its huge mouth, swallowing Kobe into its stomach. It then raised its body high and smashed through the ground, burrowing deep into the ground. The rock python broke through all sorts of soil and rocks, rushing towards what used to be the second underground floor. Chapter 107. Most of the time, Grimm didn't even have the time to distinguish between the things hidden in the bushes and see which ones were useful and which ones were useless. As long as he sensed an elemental aura lingering in the area, he would order the rock python to swallow it whole, storing it in its stomach to identify it later. Half an hour later, the ground cracked and trembled. The rock python that had drilled into the ground had returned. Let's go, let's go. The greater the harvest, the more excited Grimm became. Without another word, he jumped into the stomach of another rock python and ran away. After a quarter of an hour, a strange black figure suddenly appeared on the devastated battlefield. Through his powerful spiritual perception, he was like a ghost walking lightly on the battlefield. Soon, he stopped at the place where the flower spirit had died and silently sensed the remaining elemental aura in the air. These remnant auras were meaningless to others, but they provided him with a large amount of information and key data on the battlefield. Soon, the scenes of the battle that seemed like they were going back in time formed in his mind. He did not feel anything about the great war that had taken place, and he was expressionless even when the quasi-sorcerer was killed. However, when Grimm ordered the rock python to take away the flower spirit's remains, his body trembled slightly, and his eyes, which were hidden under the hood, shot out a terrifying light. Since the most valuable flower spirit had been lost, there was no need for this place to exist anymore. With a low murmur of an incantation, countless ghost-like shadows rushed out of his body and rushed in all directions of the magical jungle. Soon, the entire jungle became dead silent, and he could no longer sense the existence of any life. The magical jungle had become a thing of the past, and this place would once again become a dead zone without any life. After doing all this, the black figure disappeared just like he had appeared. During the entire process, no one and nothing could sense his existence. It was as if he was just a ghost wandering between heaven and earth. Grim didn't rush back to the wizard tower. He brought his team of devil puppets out of the ground and sneaked into the Krila Mountains. He dug a cave in a secluded place and began to slowly sort out the spoils of war. The first things that the rock python spat out were the sleeping Mary and the flower spirit that had been sucked dry. Grim examined her carefully again. Mary was simply overwhelmed by the large amount of blood. She could only slowly digest and absorb the power in the blood by sleeping. According to the AI chip's calculations after scanning, Mary had really struck it big this time. It was extremely likely that she would break through to the ranks of quasi-witches. Grim laid a thick blanket in a corner of the cave and placed Mary on it. She had a sweet smile, a face as red as a ripe apple, bright red lips, and beautiful eyelashes that fluttered like butterflies. Mary, who was sound asleep, showed a rare gentle and calm demeanor. Grim could not help but peck her on the forehead. After settling Mary down, Grim could not help but look at Hua Ling's remains. Without the support of an endless stream of energy, and with all the blood in its body sucked dry, the flower spirit was shriveled and wrinkled like a deflated man. But what attracted Grim the most was the rosette armor and the magic bow. In the previous battle, these two items had made Grim suffer a lot. After examining the magic bow for a long time, Grim finally heard the exciting chime in his mind. Beep. Item information scanned complete. Discovered a magic bow. Item information is as follows. Can be modified. Grim excitedly licked his lips, his eyes squinting. He had already roughly scanned the magic bow's basic information in the previous battle, but now he had added more details to it. This was nothing to be excited about. The only thing that made him excited was the AI chip's conclusion. This magic bow could be modified. This magic bow had always been used by the flower spirit, and the energy system that made it fire light arrows was also plant type. This made it very difficult for others to use it. But now that the AI chip had determined that it could be modified, this meant that its energy system could be changed to either fire or blood. Grim couldn't help but feel a little excited when he thought of himself sitting on the head of a rock python, shooting countless light arrows at his enemies with a snap of his fingers. Grim gently placed the magic bow at the side and could not help but mutter softly, calm down, calm down. Let's see if there's a wand that suits me. If there is, I'll give it to Mary. If not, he. The second item he plucked from the flower spirit's body was the rosette armor. Grim really wanted to keep such a protective treasure for himself. But when he thought of how the rosette armor would grow countless rosette branches when attacked by enemies, Grim immediately felt that it was not a good thing. Damn it, a man wearing a set of rosette armor to fight against enemies. Just the thought of it was enough to make one hiss. Forget it, I'll just give it to Mary after it's modified. As a wild magical creature, the flower spirit only had these two items on its body, and they looked rather shabby. After the armor was removed, the flower spirit's petite body was completely exposed. However, without the nourishment of the blood, the once smooth and sparkling skin was now wrinkled and shriveled like a 70 or 80-year-old woman. It had completely lost its previous beauty, and to the touch, it felt like the bark of an adult tree. Although the flower spirit was already dead, Grim could sense that the organs in her body still contained a powerful aura that was different from the others. Should he cut her into pieces and harvest her for magic materials? Or should he keep the corpse intact and think of a way to maximize the benefits? Grim hesitated for a moment, but decided to put it aside for now. He would consult with a professional before making a further decision. If he was a necromancer, he would definitely turn the flower spirit's corpse into a powerful corpse puppet. However, he was a fake puppeteer, so it was difficult to squeeze out every last drop of value from this Magus-level monster. After using the AI chip to scan the flower spirit's body structure, he extracted information about the vital parts of her body and passed it to the AI chip for analysis. Only then did Grimm begin to deal with the rest of the spoils. The gnome cabbie, who had been carefully waiting on the side, gently placed a large cloth bag in front of Grimm. As the bag was opened, countless rays of brilliant light shone on Grimm's face, causing him to be unable to open his eyes for a long time. Shadow stone, tiger's eye stone, peacock stone, green agate, lesser moonstone, jade, topaz, turquoise, mountain blood, ruby, large cat's eye stone, sapphire, giant emerald, green moonstone, emerald olivine, fire garnet, Draenor diamond, blood garnet, water jade, dawn stone, night eye stone, red obsidian, topaz, lion's eye stone, burning stone, scarlet spike. Grimm could not help but sigh. This flower spirit was definitely a gem collector. Almost all the magic gems he had heard of could be found here. A gem randomly taken out from the bag could be exchanged for tens of miles of land and people in a mortal kingdom. Especially the few that were of higher value, they were more than enough to exchange for a count. However, in the eyes of an acolyte, these things were merely expendable magic materials. However, such expensive magic materials could only be consumed by official magi without batting an eyelid. Grimm gently fiddled with the gems, picking one up from time to time to examine it. After all, he only knew a little about most of the magic gems from books. He could not understand them better now that he was holding them in his hands. Cabbie, who was standing beside Grimm, could not help but breathe heavily. Under the colorful light, he found it increasingly difficult to breathe, and his heart could not help but skip a few beats. Grimm casually picked out a few gems that he might be able to use, then pointed to the rest of the gems and said softly, "I'll leave these gems to you. You can take 1/3 of the things inside as your reward for this adventure. Your performance today was very good, especially the trick you left behind on the magic wand control was even more spectacular. You deserve all of this." After hearing Grimm's words, Cabbie's green face twitched. Before the smile on his face could bloom, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Grimm shook his head and ignored his subordinate who had just shown his worth. He continued to rummage through the pile of gems and quickly pulled out a magic scepter that was as red as fire coral from the bottom of the sea. The Flaming Lord's scepter. The moment the scepter appeared, Grimm could feel the indescribable surging fire elemental force hidden within it. Before the scepter entered his hand, Grimm could feel the elemental flames curling around it. However, when he held the scepter in his hand, the strange heat from before disappeared without a trace. The scepter once again became warm and comfortable, and waves of warmth continuously flowed into his body. The fire elemental force within Grimm's body also began to stir, becoming more active than before by more than 30%. AI chip, scan this Flaming Lord's scepter. Beep, mission accepted. Beginning scan. Beep, scan completed. Results are as follows. Item: Flaming Lord's scepter attribute, fire element support. The wielder will have fire resistance, intermediate, immunity to low-ranked fire element damage, rapid casting, fire element, skills. Flame shield, 3 times per day, summon fire djinn, quasi-magus. 1 time per day, subsidiary function. When placed on a special magic altar, it can open a small teleportation gate to the fire elemental plane. Every day, it can summon 1 fire djinn, quasi-magus, 2 fire giants, advanced, 5 lava hounds, intermediate, or 10 fire spirits, beginner. These fire elemental creatures are unable to leave the magic altar within a kilometer. Once the Flaming Lord's scepter leaves the altar, all fire elemental creatures will immediately return to their original plane. Ugh! Grimm could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Chapter 108. Such a powerful magic weapon seemed to be tailor-made for him. Grim held the Flaming Lord's scepter in his hand and looked at it admiringly. The scepter was made up of 3 parts: the tail ornament, the body, and the head. The body of the scepter was 1 meter long and was made of a special material that glowed red. Although it emitted a faint red light, it was warm to the touch and comfortable to hold in one's hand. The tail ornament was embedded with an attributeless magic gem, which was obviously designed to be placed on the flame altar. The head of the scepter was carved with 3 fire dragons, and in the middle of the dragons was the heart of the Flaming Lord. This was a special magic gem from the fire elemental world that contained a trace of fire magic. As long as this magic gem was present, the holder of the scepter would have the power to resist fire damage. However, the fire here referred to the normal flames of nature and not the elemental flames created by spells. With this Flaming Lord's scepter, Grim had the power to bathe in a lava volcano. After fiddling with it for a long time, Grim reluctantly put it away in his storage belt. From now on, he could be considered to have a wizard tool that belonged solely to him. It was no wonder that the flower spirit kept such a good item. It was not compatible with its element. After rummaging through the pile of gems for a while, Grim pulled out 2 strange items. One was a purple vulcanized test tube with a mysterious potion, and the other was a magic book with a ghost's head drawn on it. Grim picked up the mysterious potion, pulled out the cork, and sniffed it. The pungent smell of fish and pepper made him frown. The test tube was filled with a purple magic potion. As Grim shook it, it glowed with purple light. Bloodline strengthening potion? Grim's eyes lit up. He dipped his finger into the purple potion and put it in his mouth. After a while, the AI chip gave him an answer. Bloodline strengthening potion. This thing might not be of much use to Grim, who was determined to walk the path of an elemental magus, but it was a priceless treasure for acolytes who walked the path of bloodlines like Mary. Its greatest value was that it could purify an acolyte's bloodline, allowing them to take a step closer to the source of their bloodline. Therefore, after confirming the composition of the potion, Grim poured it into Mary's mouth without hesitation. Anyway, Mary was relying on her sleep to digest the surging blood power from the flower spirit's body, which was also an evolution of her vampire talent. At this time, with some external help, it would undoubtedly make it easier for her to break through, and her strides would be bigger. Devouring the blood of a powerhouse could effectively increase a vampire's life level, and the bloodline strengthening potion could stimulate a vampire's talent to evolve again. The 2 complemented each other, and it was a huge boost for Mary. Therefore, after drinking the potion, Grim could not help but rub his hands in anticipation. He really wanted to know what Mary's strength and bloodline would look like after both of them were upgraded. After dealing with the bloodline enhancement potion, Grim calmed himself down and started to analyze the book. When Grim's gaze fell on the gloomy ghost head on the cover of the book, a pale white fog spread out from the book, and the ghost head came to life in the fog. It was the face of a gloomy ghost hidden in the shadows, and the expression on its face could never be seen clearly because of the fog. As Grim furrowed his brows, a strange voice sounded in his heart. Upholding the will of the ancient times and the principle of equivalent exchange. Little fellow walking the path of a magus, do you want to obtain the great and mysterious ancient knowledge? Then quickly open me. Grim was slightly shocked. He had heard of such books that had their own intelligence. Most of them were created by ancient magi, and there was a high possibility that they contained some special spells or mysterious knowledge that no one knew about. Of course, it could also be a prank left behind by ancient magi. Even official magi had been fooled by it in a laughable fashion. In order to open a book guarded by a demonic spirit, one had to follow the will of the book's owner and satisfy some of the evil interests of the demonic spirit. Therefore, it was a fair trade that gambled on one's luck. Respected demonic spirit, if I want to read the contents of this book, what kind of price do I have to pay? Grim was not fooled by the demonic spirit's flowery words, and he calmly asked the most important question. According to Grimm's knowledge, some apprentices who were not strong enough could not wait to open the demonic spirits book after obtaining it. When they realized that the price of reading the book was too high for them to bear, it was already too late. Such unlucky people could not learn ancient spells, and instead, they had to pay with their precious lives. Therefore, in the basic rules for apprentices, they had to be careful when they encountered otherworldly beings or demonic spirit. Once they fell into their trap or were forced into a contract, paying with their lives was not a big deal. What was more frightening was that their souls would become the enemy's spoils of war. When it came to playing with souls, these demonic spirits were as powerful as necromancers. Perhaps realizing that his little trick had been seen through by the other party, the gloomy ghost face became listless. "You really are a boring person. Don't you have the slightest desire for ancient spells and mysterious knowledge? Why are you so fussy about these boring questions? Ancient demonic spirit, please answer my question." Okay. If you want to read this book, you'll have to pay 15 constitution points. The demon spirit's voice was getting lower and lower. In the end, it sounded like a kitten snoring. It was impossible to hear what it was saying. Grimm suddenly broke out in a cold sweat and almost threw the demonic spirit book in his hand. Damn it, it's 15 points of constitution. No wonder Hua Ling had never opened this book. Perhaps even she was reluctant to lose the precious 15 points of constitution. Even Grimm only had 3 points of constitution. If he accidentally opened the book, then the contract between him and the demonic spirit book would be established. If he could not fulfill the contract, he would definitely die on the spot and have his soul extracted. Just as Grimm raised the demonic spirit book and was about to throw it to the corner of the cave to eat dirt, the AI chip transmitted a set of data that stopped him from doing so. The AI chip magnified the data of the scene, and the vague last sentence of the demonic spirit book was clearly displayed. Or replace it with something of equivalent value. This was the ancient Imerian language, and it had been mixed up with the strangest of tones. Most of the people it communicated with had probably been tricked by this little trick. Although the ancient sorcerers had enslaved demonic spirits to protect their inheritance of knowledge, they had set the most stringent rules for them. As long as someone could fulfill the reading requirement, the demonic spirit had to hand over the knowledge according to the sorcerer's will. However, no matter how strict the rules were, they could not resist the craftiness of the demonic spirit. This demonic spirit had actually found a loophole in the contract and raised the reading requirements to a shocking level. It had also hidden the most crucial terms of the contract. Yes, even if the ancient Magus was reborn, he could not accuse the demonic spirit of violating the contract. It was clearly doing everything according to the contract with the ancient Magus. As for whether or not you can understand the ancient Imerian language, it has nothing to do with the demonic spirit. It's just that your knowledge of magic is insufficient and you are not serious enough. Grimm wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and spoke to the demonic face seriously. "Lord Demonic Spirit, please tell me what are the alternatives. I want to choose carefully." The demonic face in the book suddenly became enraged and roared fiercely at Grimm. However, Grimm had already seen through its true nature. He squinted his eyes and silently enjoyed its performance. Seeing that his threats had no effect and his little trick had been seen through, the demonic spirit could only dejectedly state its true requirements. It knew that if it dragged on any longer, it would trigger the terrifying ancient contract. 15 points of constitution allows you to completely control this book. 8 points allows you to read everything in this book. 5 points allows you to read anything below the Magus rank. 3 points allows you to learn a specific spell. 1 point allows you to learn a random spell. Alternatives? I'm asking about alternatives. What kind of items can be used as alternatives? Now it was Grimm's turn to interrogate the demonic spirit. Magic gems, magical materials, mysterious knowledge that has never been recorded in this book. Everything, as long as it's related to magic, can be used as an alternative. However, the quantity will be huge. What about this? Grimm tried to put an emerald on the book. It was a giant emerald the size of a human heart. It would be worth at least 230 magic crystals in the Magus market. 3 Constitution. The demonic spirit's answer shocked Grimm. If he calculated according to the basic value, then wouldn't 15 Constitution cost him almost 12,000 magic crystals to completely control this book? Such a huge price might not be worth mentioning to a Magus, but it was an astronomical figure to a Magus apprentice who was in desperate need of resources. Grimm's mouth twitched. He tilted his head and looked at the mountain of gems. Now, he felt that even a little more would not be enough for him to spend. Grimm placed the book on the ground and began to pile magic gems on top of it. Every time he placed a gem, the demon spirit would report a small number. Shadow stone, tiger's eye stone, peacock stone, green agate, lesser moonstone, jade, topaz, turquoise, ruby, cat's eye stone, sapphire, giant emerald, blue moonstone, fire garnet, Draenor diamond, dawn stone, red obsidian, topaz. Chapter 109. Grimm hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand and ordered the rock python to spit out a large amount of soil, sand, grass, and rattan debris from the cave. He carefully searched through the area, trying his best to find any magic tools left behind by the fire quasi-sorcerer. Kobe had long since woken up, and obediently squatted beside Grimm to help him with the dirty work. After searching through the entire pile of soil, Grimm found a total of 3 magic tools. One was a necklace that could instantly cast a fireball, one was a bracelet that could promote fire meditation, and the last was a flaming coral wand. The effects of these 3 magic artifacts were effective against fire apprentices, and they were also suitable for Grimm. However, with the Flame Lord's scepter, their effects were not as great. Grimm clenched his teeth and placed the 3 magic tools on top of the Book of Demon Spirits. 14 points. The number reported by the demon spirit made Grimm clench his teeth in anger. Just a little more. Grimm rummaged through his storage belt and waist pouch, but could not find anything suitable. As for the rest of the items, he would be heartbroken no matter what he gave up. Just as he was hesitating, an opal the size of a goose egg landed on top of the pile of gems. 15 points. This is the maximum limit for unsealing the Book of Demon Spirit. Let the Book of Demon Spirits begin unsealing. At this moment, the ghostly face finally had the terrifying aura of an ancient demon spirit. As numerous wizard formations appeared on the cover of the book, these wizard formations collapsed one after another amidst a series of faint murmurs. What disappeared along with them were the magic gems and magic tools that served as replacements. When the ghostly face gradually faded from the cover of the book, the true appearance of the book was revealed. Grimm looked in surprise at Kobe, who had a pained expression, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Grimm nodded approvingly at it, before turning his attention back to the magic book. Previously, this book could only be called the Book of Demon Spirit. Before the basic requirements to read it were met, the entire book was covered by the demon spirit. But now, as the requirements to read it were met, the demon spirit had disappeared from this world along with its spoils of war, according to the ancient contract. Only then did the Book of Demon Spirits appear in its entirety in front of Grimm. It was a leather scroll with a black leather cover. The corners of the scroll were inlaid with a metal frame, which made it look heavy and simple. Grimm weighed the book in his hand. The entire book was only 20 to 30 pages long, but it already weighed 6 to 7 kilograms, which was astounding. When Grimm's fingers gently stroked the rough cover, a string of green will-o'-the-wisp condensed into the title of the book appeared. The title of the book was written in the ancient Aymara language, Secret Scroll of Voodoo. Since Grimm had used the highest quality of sealing, he felt a sense of kinship when he held the book in his hand. In fact, he did not even need to use his hands to flip the pages. When his mental power entered the secret scroll of voodoo poison, the pages would automatically flip and stop at the parts that he was interested in according to his will. Grimm skimmed through it and was immediately shocked by the content. The entire secret scroll of voodoo poison was basically an encyclopedia of everything related to voodoo collected by ancient wizards. From the origin of voodoo to its prevalence, to various voodoo rituals, to the detailed production process of voodoo puppets, the book recorded everything in detail. Apart from the large amount of knowledge on voodoo, there were also many bizarre and unfathomable voodoo curses from ancient times, such as the Plague Cauldron, Bloodline Curse, Great Plague Collapse Spell, Kiss of Death, Plague Poison Spirit. These voodoo techniques, which made one shudder just by hearing their names, were actually extremely simple and easy to execute. Furthermore, the materials used to cast them were not rare or expensive, but human beings. To be more precise, it was a large number of people, their souls and flesh. From the beginning to the end, the entire secret scroll of voodoo seemed to be teaching people how to use the simplest method to make the pot of plague, then use the great plague destruction to create a terrifying plague that could wipe out an entire continent. Then, he collected the plague xenogeneics and combined them to create a powerful plague poison spirit. This spirit of plague would be the most powerful general under the owner of the secret scroll. As long as it was sent out, plagues and death would be everywhere it went. Any living creature that lacked the protection of witchcraft would not be able to resist the infection of this plague that was mixed with a trace of the laws of voodoo poison. Since ancient times, this spirit of plague had been the best war tool for magi to deal with those low-grade planes that resisted stubbornly. Throw a plague poison spirit into a small plane, and 1 month later, one could boldly go in and harvest without worry. Wailing souls drifted all over the world, plundering material resources all over the world. This was far more convenient than sending out large numbers of Magus troops to wipe out enemies and suppress the resistance of the natives of the plains day and night. However, this method was too vicious, and it would often suffer a strong backlash from the plane's consciousness. After all, the plane's consciousness was the combination of all the material and living creatures in the plane. When all the living creatures in the plane were wiped out, the plane's consciousness would also disappear. Hence, the owner of the spirit of plague could easily be cursed by the destroyed plane's consciousness and become an enemy of the plane. Once a Magus was labeled as an enemy of a plane, he would be hated by all the planes, including the source plane that he had grown up in. Once such a person entered a plane, it would be the wrath of the heavens and the people. All the living creatures in the plane would charge forward and attack him without fear of death, not stopping until he was dead. Hence, with such a great killing weapon in hand, even Grimm could not remain calm. Grimm tried his best to connect to the secret voodoo scroll and copied the contents of the book into the AI chip. He then passed it to the AI chip to slowly analyze and see if it could sort out something suitable for him from these ancient voodoo spells. When Grimm established a deeper spiritual connection with the secret voodoo scroll, he was surprised to find that the scroll could also be used as a witchcraft book. The hidden space of the book could store 6 completed spiritual models. This meant that as long as he held the scroll in his hands, he could instantly cast 6 spells for free. Of course, he had to store these 6 spiritual models in advance. Damn, isn't this a miniature AI chip space in another world? Grimm could not help but be filled with respect for the ancient magi. Although they were fighting alone and didn't have the perfect knowledge system of Earth in his previous life, they were still able to create this mysterious space that was filled with a strong sense of advanced technology with just a flash of inspiration from a few geniuses. Grimm could not help but express his admiration for them. He had originally thought that solidifying spiritual models in his mind was a unique technique, but it seemed that this mysterious world had a similar technique. However, the spiritual models stored in this mysterious space would disperse after being used, and could only be used again. In this aspect, it was not as cost-effective as his AI chip's space. It seemed like he was going to have another piece of magical equipment, an extremely powerful spell sequence device. In the future, when he met an enemy, he would not even need to waste a bit of his spiritual force. He would be able to use the instant casting advantage of the spell sequencer to bombard the enemy. Thinking of this, Grimm could not help but feel excited. In order to express his love for the secret voodoo scroll, he took out a half-meter-long silver chain from his storage belt and tied it to his belt. After demonstrating it a few times, he was very satisfied. As long as he willed it, the sorcery book would automatically fly to his left hand and automatically flip the pages, positioning the page on the sorcery he needed. As for the secrecy, Grimm was not worried at all. The scroll was completely under his control, and it maintained a secret connection with his spiritual force. Even if it fell into the hands of an outsider, they would only see a blank piece of parchment. Without Grimm's permission, no one would be able to see the contents of the scroll through him. This was probably the greatest significance of unlocking the scroll. While Grimm was admiring the scroll, the goblin cabbie was not idling around either. He was constantly searching through the mud and debris that the rock python had spat out. However, his efforts did not disappoint him, and he actually found something that made him overjoyed. Fragments of the flower spirit's main body. Within the withered and wrinkled pieces of bark, there was some viscous green liquid and strange fragments that looked like internal organs. It seemed that the flower spirit's main body had undergone some unexpected changes during its evolution. However, just as Grimm was examining the fragments in his hands, the AI chip's prompts sounded in his mind. Beep, detected a special bloodline gene active molecule. Recorded. Beep, detected a special bloodline gene active molecule. Recorded. Beep, detected a special bloodline gene active molecule. Recorded. A series of prompts from the AI chip resounded in Grimm's mind, and his eyes shone with unconcealable shock. These prompts were not because the AI chip had crashed, but because it kept repeating itself. Every prompt meant that it had discovered a new bloodline gene in the fragments of the flower spirit's main body. The discovery of 27 new bloodline genes made Grimm feel that something was wrong. How could a leader of monsters that was trapped in a small area come into contact with and devour so many bloodline genes? One had to know that these bloodline genes were priceless treasures that were hard to come by in the acolytes' community. With a small bottle of purified ancestral bloodline, any acolyte could embark on the path of becoming a bloodline magus. 27 new bloodline genes meant that the terrifying flower spirit had devoured 26 creatures with xenogenic bloodlines. Could it be that there were 26 bloodline acolytes in the gloomy crypt who had gone to the magical forest to die? Of course not. Even if all the bloodline acolytes in the Dagon region were gathered, they would not be able to gather 26. Chapter 110. Grimm was in a state of panic. He vaguely felt that he had unintentionally entered a dangerous domain that he should not have set foot in. It was impossible for the flower spirit to absorb so many bloodline genes on its own, so the only possibility was that these bloodline gene fragments had originally belonged to the Magus Tower's reserve. After the fallen magi had abandoned the place, the extremely fortunate surviving human-faced flower had taken the opportunity to absorb other bloodline genes, which had allowed it to grow into a terrifying flower spirit at the Magus Tower. One had to know that due to the power of the bloodline sorcerers and the power of their families, wantonly stealing the sorcerer's bloodline was forbidden in the entire sorcerer continent, and the related research on bloodlines was also prohibited. Hence, for so many bloodline genes to appear in a Magus Tower built by a fallen Magus, there might really be a huge secret behind this. Grimm's first instinctive guess was that the fallen shaman Pridika was secretly conducting experiments related to bloodline synthesis in the underground. This guess was very likely true. After all, bloodline research was still too much for a Tier 1 magus. However, as he dug deeper, Grim could not help but gulp, a huge shadow looming over his heart. Could a Tier 2 fallen sorcerer accomplish such a large-scale bloodline research on his own? It had to be known that any bloodline acolyte was a high-quality resource that all small, medium, and large factions fought over. The treatment they received was obviously above that of many elemental acolytes, body-tempering acolytes, and arcane acolytes. If there were as many as 2 digits of bloodline acolytes in the Dagon region that had been killed or had gone missing, it would have long since caused a huge commotion. However, even though Grim had been here for some time, he had never heard any news or rumors about this. Did this mean that the fallen magus had concealed himself well, or did it mean that some powerful faction was covering for him? In the Dagon region, 1 or 2 small magus families would not be able to cover the sky with one hand, and even those large families would not be able to do such a thing. In that case, the only possibility was Grim turned his head slightly, looking in the direction of the magus tower in the distance, and a trace of understanding arose in his heart. Perhaps only the scattered magus association of the Targaryen forest had the ability to do things so flawlessly. From this point of view, the design of this dark crypt was somewhat thought-provoking. On the surface, it seemed that some fallen sorcerers had escaped to the underground and were fighting for the rare and precious sorcerer resources with the surface sorcerers. However, if one were to look at it from a higher perspective, that place seemed to be a man-made conflict zone. It felt like training soldiers on the front lines. If the high-ranked magus in charge of this region had mixed in a little selfishness and carried out some taboo research, it would be logical to cover it up. After all, there was a war going on and blood was flowing there. Some acolytes who died in the underworld due to a moment of carelessness would at most be pitiful, but it was difficult to connect it to anything else. If Grim was the controller, he only needed to send more bloodline apprentices here and create some conflicts, then the deaths of the bloodline apprentices would become insignificant. Thinking about it carefully, there were 4 bloodline apprentices in this group of 10, and Mary was one of them. So far, among the 2 high-ranked apprentices who had died in battle, Sheila was a bloodline apprentice. The demon vine girl that he killed seemed to be a bloodline apprentice as well. In the past, he did not feel anything was wrong. Now that he thought about it, the death rate of bloodline apprentices, who had an advantage over others of the same rank, was actually so high. This seemed to be able to explain some things. Then how would they deal with an outsider like him who had accidentally broken into their hidden laboratory, sending him on a high-risk forced mission without batting an eyelid, and letting him die silently underground? Or maybe the mastermind should just kill Grim himself and settle the matter. In any case, no one would question a rank 2 magus about the death of a middle-ranked acolyte who had no roots in the world. Grim silently took out the Byron family badge that Wizard Angus had given him and carefully pinned it on his chest. For the first time, Grim realized the benefits of having a magus family backing him up. An hour later, when Grim carried the unconscious Mary and KB, who was carrying a big bag, to the entrance of the wizard tower, they were stopped by a wizard puppet. Without any explanation, they were brought to a huge secret room on the 9th floor of the wizard tower. It was a young wizard who was only a few years older than Grim. He had a delicate and handsome face and a tall and strong body. He was wearing a gorgeous wizard robe and a pointy wizard hat, and his whole body was brimming with a bewitching aura of youth. If it was not for the powerful spiritual pressure that was hidden in his body, Grim might have thought that this was a fake wizard apprentice in disguise. However, when he sensed the pure and reserved spiritual wave, Grim felt as if a sun had risen in front of him. Under the blinding light, he almost became blind. Grim hurriedly lowered his head and slightly bowed to show his respect. He secretly released some fire particles to protect his eyes, and only then did the pain from his eyes lessen a little. In his arms, the sleeping Mary also seemed to sense a trace of threat. She wriggled her body uneasily and hid her pretty face deep in his arms. Behind Grim, the goblin Kaby had long since curled up into a ball in fear. He crawled on the ground and could not get up anymore. As a goblin, Kaby's intuition for danger was far more sensitive than that of humans. Therefore, he was more affected by the spiritual pressure. This was an ordinary meeting room that was simple to the point of being a little crude. The tea table and wooden chairs were not carved at all, and they still maintained the original color of the wood. The sinister young sorcerer who was sitting upright and sipping a cup of steaming hot beverage was the Grade 2 sorcerer in charge of this sorcerer tower, Lord Andre. After all, this was a different world from Earth. Although the appearance, behavior, and living habits were similar to Europe on Earth in the last century, there was still a huge difference. The most obvious difference was in people's surnames. In Grimm's memory, the Europeans on Earth usually had extremely complicated surnames to show their family origins. However, in this sorcerer world where the strong were respected, the role of families was weakened. Instead, new families were formed around a certain powerful wizard. The head of the family was not usually the strongest person in the family. Instead, it was just an elder who was good at managing the territory. However, the direction of the family's development was usually controlled by the powerful high-grade wizards who hid behind the scenes. Sorcerers and families were like two intertwined trees. When the family grew stronger, the sorcerers of the family would become vines attached to it. Once the wizards became strong, the family would become the wizards' appendages, and they could do whatever they wanted. Therefore, many powerful wizards did not have surnames. Instead, it was their family that was honored to be named after them, forming a kind of reverse dependence. Since the first day Grimm came to the dark crypt wizard tower, he had already memorized the name of this Sir Andre. However, with his status, it was impossible for him to have the opportunity to meet such a big shot. However, today was a special case. Therefore, Grimm lowered his head and bowed, waiting there silently. He did not dare to show any disrespect. After a long time, Wizard Andre slowly finished the hot drink in his cup. Afterward, he gently put down the cup and looked at Grimm, who was standing respectfully below. Even without raising his head, Grimm could feel the scorching gaze on him. This did not mean that Wizard Andre had an affinity with fire elemental energy. It was just that the elemental energy in his eyes was too dense. When his gaze landed on Grimm, the sudden increase in elemental energy had already caused a certain amount of elemental damage to him. That was why Grimm felt like he was on fire. "Did you go underground again recently?" Wizard Andre finally opened his mouth. Grimm's body slightly trembled, and he lowered his head even more. "Yes, sir. I just came back from the underground." "Did you find anything?" Grimm's head slightly moved, as if he wanted to look up, but he quickly stopped himself. "Yes, sir. I found something." A confused expression appeared on Grimm's lowered face. Obviously, he did not understand why a rank 2 magus would care about a mere intermediate acolyte like him. Of course, this expression was deliberately put on by Grimm. With the powerful spiritual force of a rank 2 magus, the entire Magus Tower would be under his all-encompassing perception. How could the changes on Grimm's lowered face escape his senses? He had to put on a show. From the moment he stepped into the Magus Tower, Grimm had tried his best to hypnotize himself, pretending to be a reckless brat who knew nothing. After all, the information he had obtained was based on the AI chip's powerful data collection, summarization, and analysis. If a normal acolyte wanted to find out the deep secrets of the flower spirit, they would have to rely on the precise equipment in the alchemy laboratory. Therefore, in order to reduce the danger, Grimm had to act as if he knew nothing about the inside story. Moreover, Grimm had tried to probe the goblin cabbie. This guy seemed to know nothing about the bloodline experiment. It didn't even know how it got its strange abilities. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.